Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I will call this budget deliberation meeting for Fundy Albert Council for November 19th, 2024 to order. First item of business is the adoption of the agenda. An agenda for this meeting was circulated and was posted on our website. We'll accept a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. So moved by Councillor Jones, seconded by Councillor Land. Any discussion on the motion? Not. All in favor, signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, if any? Motion's adopted unanimously. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare in relation to today's agenda? Hearing none, move on to the main part of the reason why we're here, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Welcome to the budget deliberation meeting to review the draft 2025 general operating and utility budgets compiled by our administrative team. The agenda for today's meeting will proceed as follows in terms of how the budget deliberations will unfold. The Chief Administrative Officer and Treasurer will present the draft general operating budget to Council. I would ask Council to allow them to complete the presentation before asking any questions. We'll then review the general operating budget line by line item. Members of Council will then be provided an opportunity to make an opening statement, ask questions, and this is all during the review of the line by line items, and make suggestions in terms of possible changes to the budget elements. The CAO will make note of the suggestions and possible comments in terms of impacts on services. No changes to the budget will be made during today's meeting. Once the discussions have concluded about the general operating budget, we can move to the Fundy Albert utility fund budgets. There'll be no questions entertained regarding individual salaries or employees. If there are any questions or comments in relation to details involving salaries, these should appropriately be asked during a closed session. This is why a closed session agenda item is included in today's meeting, so Council may want to adjourn the meeting to go into closed session near the end. With Council's agreement, we can take a short recess of 15 minutes at approximately 12:30 p.m., recognizing that we are scheduled to go from 11 until 3. Near the conclusion of the meeting, there will be an opportunity for members of the public to comment in relation to what they've heard. After the conclusion of the meeting, the CAO and her team will then go back and make suggested changes to the draft budget for presentation at the second budget meeting on Saturday. Are there any questions in relation to that? So there being none, I will now open it up and ask our CAO and Treasurer to present the first draft of the 2025 general operating budget.
Thank you, Mayor Rochon, and thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. First and foremost, I want to extend a sincere appreciation to the administration for their hard work and dedication in presenting and preparing this initial budget proposal. It has been no small task. In the face of rising inflation, aging infrastructure, and steadily increasing fixed costs, the challenges of balancing the needs for continued service with the desire to maintain low tax rates has been particularly difficult this year. We look forward to engaging in a constructive and thoughtful discussion during these budget deliberations as we work together to strive and arrive at a solution that strikes the right balance that not only meets our immediate needs, but lays the groundwork for a sustainable future. And so thank you once again for your time, attention, and ongoing support as we navigate through this important process. And everybody take a deep breath and smile, because we should start off on a good note, and it's not going to be easy for sure, but we'll get through it, I think. So the budget workbook was presented to Council on Friday. We initially started off the report with a budget survey. Again, this was a small snapshot. We're hoping that in future years more people will participate, but really this one here we saw 138 respondents. So a little bit of a snapshot in time, a few questions just to see kind of what the pulse was of the community. So top things that people are looking at is roads, infrastructure, and water. Of course, we all agree that those are the important issues. We asked a question about whether people wanted to see taxes. Nobody wants their taxes to increase, but given the choice, would you increase taxes to increase services? Would you decrease taxes? And overwhelmingly, of course, people want to maintain the taxes even if it means maybe reducing some services a little bit. That was the overall impression. However, on the same token, 93% said that they wanted to see that we're actively going after our aging infrastructure. So a little bit of a conflict in there about maintaining some of that and still having that 93%. So again, it needs to be taken into context, just a little bit of a survey. So we then went into the next section of the report where we're talking about priorities and issues and trends. And of course, there are a lot of things that are facing this administration. When it comes to the budget, inflation is a big one. Everything costs more. The other thing that could affect us is the more storms and things that happen in other areas of the world. It affects our ability to get the products that we need, the items that we need in order to do the projects that we have coming up. In this section, we talked about economic factors, so inflation, the operation expenses, expenditures, and again, the supply chain, like I just mentioned. And again, there's also, we apply for grants and we apply for grants that we're really at their mercy. Thank you. We're at their mercy for being accepted for those grants, right? So we're not the only ones applying for a lot of those. And you know, in this report, we showed some of the financial grants that we were receiving in 2023 and 2024. And of course, we're going to still go after actively seeking out those grants in the future for 2025. When we look at our asset management plan, we have to do some strategic planning when it comes to our infrastructure and, you know, some financial planning for future projects. So in one part of the section, we did include projects that we are starting to work on a master list. Those are just to give people an idea of the amount of work that needs to be done. And we're going to be in 2025 making it a priority to make sure that we have those projects listed and we have a 5-year, 10-year plan of how we're going to go about tackling that. There were some legislative impacts that affect the budget this year. Of course, the outcome of the election, things could change with that. We also see that maybe CPP pensionable earnings could increase, and there may be an increase in minimum wage as well. And then I will turn it over to our Director of Operations, Ian Barrett, for this section.
Can I scroll up?
Oh, I'm 2 slides behind. Here you go.
Okay, then all this section, all we're going to try and highlight it's not specifically what public works do, it's what outside contracts that we work together with to deliver stuff around throughout Fundy Albert. Just a quick snapshot of what it is we actually look after with 7.5 staff, not with a half body somewhere, it's just part time. We serve 3 communities across pretty much 100 kilometres from the top to the bottom of Fundy Albert, so there's a lot of distance to cover there. We've got a total road network of just over 60 kilometres, 3 different water distribution networks, each have their own nuances in the way they operate. And again, within them, it's different levels of water operating that we require to manage and maintain them. Again, 3 wastewater networks, again, all 3 are different. And within those networks, we've got, as you can see there, 60 plus kilometres of pipe work and a lot of the assets that we must maintain to keep them going. Storm water network as well. Again, each village has its own needs on that. And currently that is a 14 kilometre of storm drains, 92 catch basins. And then moving down, we've got a total of 43 facilities that we currently manage. That's the annex here at the back. One thing I did forget to put on there is the artisan huts down at the near the post office in Hillsborough here. So that's a couple more to add to that. We've got approximately 10 kilometres of community trails that we look after, and a total fleet and equipment value of about 3.2 million. So that's what we look after as a public works team of 7.5 people. Over the past year then, there have been a number of accomplishments, and this is absolutely nothing to do with me, it's only been 2 months. But some of the key things we've done is the Pound Hill resurfacing. The administration formed by itself, planned that, made it happen, that resurfacing has happened with an external contractor. 80% of the gravel roads around Fundy Albert have been graded, and we are now looking towards what future improvements we can do. Styles Road in Riverside-Albert, again, a key issue as highlighted by the feedback from the community is roads we're working on. Stars Road in Riverside-Albert requires work to allow the snow clearance to continue, allow locals access. That is being looked into with the contract being awarded for that. Hopefully works commencing soon. In terms of compliance, the arena, the water treatment plant there was not compliant with Legionella management. That is now all in place with the correct water management plan being developed as we speak to ensure that we are now compliant throughout. We also, with the arena, we managed to open it early to the public despite the equipment issues and breakdowns, coinciding with the time that we were doing the water management plan for Legionella and struggled with the hot weather. We did actually manage to open it early this year, although it was a bit of a struggle with the team. Bit more on stormwater, about the completion of the Albert stormwater study. That's actually now an excellent tool for us to use to really plan the future of how we're going to manage the stormwater in Alma. And it is hoped that we'll be able to get the same kind of studies done for Riverside-Albert and Hillsborough, so we can really start putting a decent strategy to manage those issues that come up on a regular basis. And the final point there at the bottom of this page is we've supported 8 in-kind requests, which come to a total of approximately 32 hours to a value of $1,600 public works time. Across cool. Obviously, other things that have gone on, we've upgraded the generators at the warming centres in Alma and Hillsborough to the Generac ones, so that actually reduces the maintenance that we as a public works team have to do because it's all done through their system. And a couple of final points is the initial development of a single point of contact system within Fundy Albert. You probably won't see much of this yet. It is hidden away in the back of the Fundy Albert website because we don't want to get a massive surge of things. We're trying to do a soft launch so we can start to learn how we can best manage all of the issues and reporting that come in from the public. We can manage them effectively and quickly. Also, we started a specific training program with the public works team, where the initial stages are getting all the theory online training that we can to ensure that we are compliant, with a look to next year delivering some more practical training to increase the skill set of the public works team so we can deliver more services in-house. As well, in addition to these, there's other stuff which within the utility document that we've done on in terms of water and wastewater. There's a lot of work that go on there as well. Good. Okay then. Our 2025 priorities. It's very broad brush, but we've broken it down into 3 elements: team, tasks, facilities and equipment. The key priority is the team. Without a good team, we're not going to be able to actually deliver the service we want. The initial part of that is making sure our team is qualified in the relevant things they need to do and fully understand how to do that safely. That's for their own safety, liability on us as a village for them doing the work, and making sure they do the work to the correct standard so none of the public gets hurt while that work is being carried out. Part of that as well, we've got to make sure that our public works team, they're our team, they are a most valuable asset. We need to make them feel, one, for their benefit, make them feel valued, and to make them visible in the community so that the taxpayer can see us going out and doing this work. To that end, we're looking at developing and implementing the Fundy Albert uniform policy. You'll see all of our guys dressed in uniform that can easily be identified as them being members of Fundy Albert. And hopefully as well, this will help reduce or help increase the public coming to us and speak to us on the ground so we get a better understanding of what it is the public are wanting us to deliver. There is also going to be a bit of a review and adjustment of the public's work structure. There's been a lot of turnover in the past 18 months, 2 years. We've gone from 3 small communities that probably benefit, it's quite easy to manage big problems in a small space. However, we're now managing multiple problems in a much larger space, with realistically not a much bigger workforce than what existed across the original 3 villages. So we must review what skills we hold, the type of structure we need to deliver all of that effectively. I've already spoken about the training in our accomplishments. I'll just repeat myself and say, training is key to make sure that we get these guys trained up to do things safely and compliantly. The next priority is the task. Although we have a good understanding of the tasks that we need to carry out across the communities in terms of cutting grass, sweeping roads, maintaining the systems, what we really need to do is do a deep dive into that to understand exactly what kind of time and resources that is going to take up from the village. This is going to help inform the structure of the workforce and will also help us start developing the correct levels of service so it's equal across the board. After the task then, we've got facilities and equipment. This is our third priority, to start looking at the facilities to ensure that the facilities we've got are safe. Are they compliant? Have they got the correct fire marshal surveys done? Have they got the correct alarm systems in place? Are the fire extinguishers in date, good to go? So we know that when members of the public are using these facilities, we know that they are safe. And also on that, we've got to understand about how we approach the facilities and equipment to ensure that we manage them sustainably. Whilst quick, easy fixes may be cheaper in the short term, in the longer term, those repeated cheap fixes will cost us more money. So although there may be delays in delivering some of this stuff, the infrastructure or facilities and equipment, it'll be for the benefit of ensuring it's sustainable over a longer period of time. And that's my key points.
I can do this. So this is basically, again, we put this in just to demonstrate that things cost money. These are the things that we're up against. This is not an exhaustive list at the moment. It is something that we are working on, and we will come back to council with. But we just wanted you to look at it and appreciate that although we do get funding for some things, we don't for others. We still have to explore all of that, but it's the cost. This is the cost of the projects that we are faced with in order to keep our aging infrastructure up to standard. So that was in your the provincial municipal highway plan is part of that. Obviously, we every year we can resubmit what we want our priority projects to be. And the asset management plan is playing a key role in all of this as well, because it's really where we get our guidance. We certainly, this year we did the 2020 for Hillsborough, and we came to council earlier on and asked for some money to be transferred over to complete the asset management plan by putting the existing ones from Alma and Riverside-Albert. So now we have one asset management plan that has all of the information in it, although the other 2 communities are a little bit older. They're from 2018, I believe. It gives us a starting point that we're at least looking at all of it on the same page, and we can then do the upgrades whenever we make changes. We can upgrade in the system so that we have information on our assets and how we can go about pricing those. The debentures one was put in here again just as a demonstration when considering budget line items, that there are items that we are currently paying and will still be paying. So some of our recommendations could be based on the fact that until something gets paid off on here, we maybe shouldn't be putting more into it until the original debt is paid off. It's a consideration for our budgeting.
All right.
And now it's Jillian, her turn.
So to start off, we're going to go through revenues, and I'll give you a better idea of what really each revenue represents and different changes. All right. So for fire, this has actually increased a little bit. I spoke with our rural district manager for 7 yesterday, and he advised that he will do an increase of 3% without our financial statements. And he is also looking at giving an extra amount for the cost of the new fire truck in Riverside-Albert. Once I have an amount, I will share with council. For roads and streets, it has increased a small amount as per the per kilometer rate from DTI. For solid waste collection, recycling materials, we've seen a big increase as this is a new item. This is the revenue that we'll receive from circular materials for our blue garbage. For community center and hall, it has increased, but that is due to me reclassing at the activity center, including the incubator spaces, to the community center and hall section as the expenses align with the revenue. Swimming pools and beaches and marinas has increased with the efforts that were put in by our community services director. We were able to receive more revenue from our pool and foresee the same in the future. For the skating rink and arena, we are proposing an increase in our rates to help with the rising operating costs and required upgrades. This will give us an expected revenue for next year of an extra $10,000 and more in the coming years. For cultural buildings and facilities, this has increased as we've had received more rentals in the gallery space as well as the small space up front. For animal control, I foresee this remaining the same for the future, where we're all under one contract. That may change going forward, but that is still unforeseeable. For construction, even though the rate of building permits has decreased, we still foresee a double revenue in what we have originally projected for the year. With that, I increased the revenue by $8,000. Rentals and other structures, this includes I can never say it right, Artesian Village rentals, as well as office space rentals in the former Riverside-Albert and Alma offices. This year, I included the interest on investments as we have received quite a fair amount in our general operating from our bank. For surplus for the previous year, I have still yet to receive our financial statements, but I still foresee at least $100,000 as a surplus. So for this exercise, I've included that amount to demonstrate where our tax rates could be. For utility funds, this goes based on what services are provided from general operating to the utilities. This has increased due to a water operator in charge and other costs for fleet and so on. I've included an operating reserve amount of $50,000 to help lower the tax rates as it has increased due to fixed costs that we have no control over. For our expenses, so for our council, we included a 2.38 cost of living increase as a recommendation. For our development seminars and other legislative costs, we have recommended these remain the same. For our administration salaries and expenses, we are recommending a cost of living increase. For our office buildings, we were seeing a decrease down to $71,110. This is because we have reclassed 2849 to the library expense line, and where the Riverside-Albert office is not operated on a regular basis. Our legal services, we have increased by around $2,500 as we have foreseen a rise in legal services utilized over the past year. Shows a consistent increase in legal needs for the municipality. Other administrative services has increased by around $19,000. A big part of this increase includes branding, promotions, and website. Branding being an example would be a new sign showing Fundy Albert at the Albert County Exhibition Grounds. Our audit will remain the same, even though our year is to end over budget. It was caused to the expense not being accrued in Alma and Hillsborough for 2022 audit. For purchasing, there is a fair amount of an increase. This is due to the net HST that is within this budget is higher than what it was in the previous year. For civic relations, we're foreseeing this to remain the same, and that we will continue to be transparent as a village and doing public meetings with our constituents. Training and development.
I think Ian was going to speak.
I'll let Ian do it.
Yeah, so again, I've already touched on training and development there. Obviously, there's an increase in that. There seems to be quite a significant increase with the training budget for Fundy Albert this year. There's a number of reasons for that, and that is one, with the turnover we've started over the past year or so, we've lost a lot of the skills and knowledge that were held within the team. Currently, we're working on the online learning to ensure we're compliant in terms of safety. However, there will still be a lot more things that we need to deliver next year to ensure that we can deliver the services the way we're supposed to do them. Two parts of this. One is the water side. The water qualifications is a must-have. We must have level 1 or level 2 water distribution or water treatment operator to allow us to run the system ourselves in Fundy Albert. We also need a level 1 wastewater. Currently, we have 2 level 1 distribution, and we have no wastewater operators. That is all backed up by Heather Cale, who is currently our operator in charge, that's allowed us to move forward and continue operating. Obviously, as we move forward, those courses are in the region of about $2,000 each, and we're going to have some sort of redundancy in the system as well. So there's an element there. There's also a significant amount of work that the public works could do if we have the correct training. The best example I can bring out of this is in the Alma stormwater study. There was close to $2 million worth of work in there, which a significant amount is ditching at $35 per metre. So you could look at that and say, well, that's $35,000 for each kilometre of ditching we need to do. If we have a public works employee trained for $2,500 for an excavator course and then pay them their hourly wage, we can make a significant saving in doing the ditching ourselves. On top of that, it makes it sustainable by having those skills in-house. If we pay an outside contractor to do our ditching, we still need to bring somebody in to maintain those into the future. If we have that skill that improves year on year, our cost to deliver services like that continually decrease up until the point. And again, other justification for the increase is the compliance piece, making sure that we've got all the relevant health and safety things in place, and that our staff are delivering work safely. Good.
Okay, I'll continue. And also to add to that note, we've also budgeted for A&B courses which are offered for our office staff, which are targeted towards learning more on how local governments and our process, also to give special training for our staff to stay up with payroll rules and as well as accounting. For cost of assessment, I am still pending a new rate. I have yet to receive this from the province. For regional and collaborative services, this is a fixed increase from the Service Commission, and it is raised up over $10,000. For conventions and delegations, we have increases. As we had seen last year, there was low capability for all of council to be a part of UMNB, and only one staff was able to be a part of the AMB. And also for Public Works, there was no money for them to have the ability to attend their annual conference. This may seem just as an opportunity for people to go away, but I found when I was able to attend AMB, this gives us the opportunity to educate and to make contacts that we does not make them. For liability insurance, this remained the same as we don't really foresee it increasing. Other grants and community grants. We have decreased this amount to initially find savings as we did not give out the full amount that was budgeted last year. For protective services under RCMP, They have projected on their website of a 19.61% increase. I've yet to see the 2025 rates as we are still receiving accounts and different documents from the province. For under fire, this includes firefighting, force personnel and expenses, fire alarm systems, which include our TMR radios, water costs, station and building, fighting equipment, fire investigation and prevention, training and development, and our contractual agreement with the town of Riverside. About a month ago, I met with all 3 fire chiefs and their deputies, and we reviewed different lists of what their wants and their needs. As the cost of the locally expired equipment was quite high, we had to remain with what was required. These being scuba air packs. These are required for our firefighters to be able to go into fires. Some bunker gear, which is a requirement to give them as they need them to go into the building and fight fires alone. They have asked for different lighting and extraction tools, AED machine, which was out of date AED machines. So a lot of our firefighters are actually getting calls for EMS. So in order to be able to provide the services, we need to provide them with the equipment required. Also, one of our department has been doing a lot of high angle rescue and have been borrowing equipment from locals, and they would like to have their own, as it's been an increasing use they've foreseen. So I know the cost of TMR radios is quite high. This being that they're looking at discontinuing the current radio service that they use, as well as if we do not, they will need to be replacing some of their radios, as that was one of their requests. For EMO services, this is basically the same as what we had budgeted for last year's, more like a disaster fund, EMO coordinator, honorarium, and plan, and also the maintenance that's required for the Kiwanis generator. For our bylaw enforcement, we have left it as the same. As administration, we see the need for future use of bylaw enforcement, but in respect to keeping the budget close to the tax rate that they currently have, we've remained the service the same. For animal control services, we've seen a decrease with the conjoined contract of one of us together. We believe that's where we'll find our savings. For regional public safety, this is a fixed cost and it's seeing a minor increase. Under transportation services, for common services, there is a bit of an increase here, but I would like to highlight that a good portion of this is for our water operator in charge. But it is 100% funded from the utility fund. It is just placed in the GO fund as I have to bill it out to the 3 utility departments. And Ian, I'll let you take it from there.
From some of the maintenance.
From your workshops and your.
Obviously, workshop charges and other buildings, slight increase there. A lot of that is just due to the increasing cost of gas, hydrogen, and that. We're not very good. General equipment, again, fleet maintenance, insurance, and all that. We should see a slight decrease in that one because we have recently got some newer equipment, and as we initiate a more proactive maintenance plan, it should hopefully reduce our breakdowns and keep the fleet more efficient and cheaper to maintain and run. Summer maintenance, private contracts. This is all to do with the asphalt padding, patching, cold patch, grading, gravel, basically the element of the roads maintenance that we do as a public works team, or at least our contracting out to outside agencies to deliver for us. There is an increase in this for 2025, and much of that budget will go towards addressing the most needed areas around the communities. That's the decision on that is going to be based on the asset management plans in terms of age and condition that are set in that, supported by actual physical inspection going around and make sure that's been updated because as was said earlier, some of the asset management plans are getting on 2 or 3 years old. So we will look before we decide. That's not just on all for the paper. Unfortunately, to maintain our streets, despite one of the biggest priorities, it is not cheap. As you said, for padding, which is almost just a band-aid put over the road to basically put a new layer of asphalt, that works out for about $225 per metre. With the budget we've got available this year, that allows us to do about 800 metres around the communities. I'll come to more of that shortly. Potholes and patching, service cuts again. Every time we put in a water service to a property, or we have to replace a culvert, there's the need to replace the asphalt on that. That has worked out. The recent ones we did in Hillsborough were around about $6,000 per cut. So we worked. It's difficult to estimate how many service cuts we'll have within the communities, but for this budget, we said 2 per community. That may end up being distributed slightly differently. In terms of potholes, again, it's really difficult to understand how many potholes are we going to have on each kilometre of road, how big those potholes are. So we've done a best guess of approximately $75 per pothole and 3 potholes per kilometre across the network, which is how we got that figure. But again, that figure may go up or down. You may save or lose on that as we deliver the work that we have to. With cold patch, again, this is what we're going to deliver just for the winter, for the worst hit areas that we need to replace or fill potholes in the most needed areas. That budget isn't too big, and hopefully as we develop with the roads, we'll be able to avoid and reduce that cost as the roads are maintained better. The grading, again, I was in a conversation before, we've graded about 80% of the roads around the Fundy Albert, and it's been identified that throughout the years, the gravel has slowly been pushed off to the sides, so there will be increased costs, possibly where we make savings to add gravel to these roads to ensure they are good serviceable roads. But again, at the moment, that's $200 an hour, and that allows us $14,000 to grade all those roads twice a year, and that is it. That doesn't include the addition of gravel just yet. Just so you've got a good idea of what the cost of roads are. Based on Stats Canada, a rural road has got a lifespan of about 32 years. That is from being laid down to its end of life cycle. That reduces to 27 if it's more of a collector road. If you look at the amount of kilometres of road we've got within the Fundy Albert, possibly 60 kilometres, realistically, to do a rotation, ensure that we replace a segment of road every year to do the 32 years cycle, that means it's nearly 2 kilometres per year that we would need to replace. And that would be digging down, replacing 100%. Even if we went down to 50% of that, that's still around about a kilometre a year that we would need to look at replacing. The road network is something that we will need to invest in heavily in the future to ensure it is maintained, it is sustainably maintained. I have got the details with me now. Looking at the asset management things that Fred have done, they looked at it and realised that proactive maintenance of roads is cheaper over a longer period of time than just replacing continuously. But it's something that when it comes to our services and infrastructure priorities, this is something we'll look again in a long-term asset management plan in place to ensure that the money that we do apply to the roads is used effectively and sustainably. Summer maintenance with DTI, again, we're at the mercy of DTI as to how much they want to increase that cost, and the increase is basically due to the added cost of the DTI put on there. Sidewalks will remain the same. Culverts, drainage, ditches. Again, we've spoken about the ditching. Just Alma is what I'll keep speaking of at the moment, because that's why we have the stormwater study done. I'm sure once the studies are done within Riverside-Albert and Hillsborough, they will probably come up with the same kind of amount of work that needs doing with those ditches. Like I said, we'll try and make the best or get best value out of that money by getting the training in-house to deliver it ourselves rather than contracting out at $35 a metre. So nice removal project contracts, that's a fixed cost. Julian's already elaborated on that about the increases on that. Stone ice removal, again with DTI, we're at the mercy of DTI about the yearly increase on their charge per kilometre. So bridges, this is increased because we've identified that there is a bridge within Fundy Albert that we do own, and we're going to have to start managing that as we move forward and to ensure it's safe for the public to go across. Street lights. Yeah,
I can. So there's been a slight decrease in 2024. We anticipated an increase in MV power rates. However, the increase did not affect the street lights as projected. For street signs, we've decreased as we having even used half of our budget for 2024. We have decreased it. Regional transport contribution. This is a fixed cost, but it has seen a decrease. For solid waste collection, we have a new contract that will expand the whole municipality that will start in February. So for the month of January, our old contracts have been pushed to expire at the end of that month. And with the new contract, there'll be a 30% increase, but it's offset by the new revenue we're receiving for circular materials, which will reduce it to 18%. Salt waste disposal tipping fees is a fixed cost that has actually decreased. Our Eco 360 plant has seen a surplus and we get to share on that. For cemeteries, we don't see any foreseen costs or repairs to our cemeteries, but I'd also like to highlight at this time that we have discovered we own another cemetery in Riverside-Albert. Other public services is the mosquito control for the Coverdale area. For the full season, they've seen a decrease with the drone, which has improved their efficiencies. For local planning, we have seen an increase of about $10,000 for beautification and habitation of lands. There is a slight increase. This is due to bucket truck costs and the installation of a perennial garden planting. Natural resources development and other, we have put in place $25,000 to kind of work under the current scope and do some education to be able to take in the whole municipality. Our provider had projected a $74,000 cost, which we do not feel the municipality could take at this time. Community development, this is a fixed cost, but has seen a decrease. Economic development personnel, which is just basically personnel. There was a minor calculation error in the previous year. That is the only reason there is a decrease. Towards Euro, there's a slight increase. We're looking to install a mini split to have more efficient heating and cooling in the building. Towards camps and parks, there's a slight increase. This is for overdue repairs where the parts have been neglected. Promotion of tourism. This is for an additional sign that will be placed inside Fundy Park for the second entrance. Tourism promotion through service commission is a fixed cost and is also seen a slight decrease. For recreation and cultural services, our 2024 accomplishments were municipal swim programs, swimming lessons and community events provided by our Director of Community Services, grants for youth sports, space rentals and upgrades. 2025 priorities are to create a sponsorship package for the arena, continue to pursue grant and funding opportunities for capital projects, and arena startup costs associated with water treatment plan, which is new for the year. So for recreation other, there has been an increase, but this will also include Canada Day as it has been reclassed to this section. Community centers and halls, there's a slight decrease. What I have done is I have removed 10,000 from the 15,000 contingency budget that I had for each building to be able to find savings. Swimming pool, beaches, marinas, and personnel other. To contain the momentum of this year, we have budgeted for an additional lifeguard and necessary operational repairs required for the pool to operate. For skating rinks and arenas, it has seen an increase, but we are now treating water treatment costs, as Ian has discussed. We have also want to take in place a feasibility study. This feasibility study, we only have to pay 20% of the cost, which would be $11,800, with the other 80% being covered under the Green Municipal Fund grant if we are accepted. For parks and playgrounds, it has seen a slight increase. This is for a contingency that we have put in place for ball field repair, light repair, as it is an asset of ours that needs taken care of, and White Rock Recreational Park operating costs. Cultural buildings and facilities, there's been a slight increase, but this is just for the cost of power and operating. For museums, the only museum we now have at this time is the Steve's House. And the big increase is to cover a foundation repair that was highlighted in 2024, which we did not have the budget to repair. For libraries, this has seen an increase slightly, really, in their operating. We have just reclassed the building to the library section. For infrastructure cost sharing, this is a new service that is mandated through the Service Commission. This is to finalize the regional sport, recreational, and cultural infrastructure cost sharing needs assessment and the framework for handling future projects in Southeast New Brunswick. For fiscal services, there is a slight increase in interest and long-term debt and principal for the former villages, and that is for the repair for Golf Club Road. Even though we foresee it being covered under the disaster fund, we still have to budget it as per our application for funding from the government. For short-term interests on capital projects, that is also for Golf Club Road and the replacement of our 3-ton truck for the public works. For capital leasing arrangements, this is new. This is to cover the fire truck lease for the first year, and it will go to debenture in the fall. Bank service charges, we've seen an increase because we have increased some of our services and to take in Interact fees. And for transfer to capital reserve, we've had the last amount that the subunit of Elmo to cover, and where Riverside-Albert's contract for snow removal is fairly low compared to the other 2 former villages, and wanting to amalgamate them together, we have created a reserve fund for reconstruction on roads which are much needed in Riverside-Albert.
So this is the unfunded section. So the, of course, figuring out how much money you need to do all the projects is kind of what we just did. And then that money, that all goes into a portal, and the portal pops out how much our tax rates will be. And of course, they're not anywhere where anybody wants them to be. And this is where we've kind of started our discussions for where we can make some cuts in services or where we need to make some increases in our tax rate. So I do believe that there was a goal with the amalgamation that within 3 years, there would be some sort of standardized tax rates across the board. We're not at that point yet. The budget kind of puts us at that as a starting point, and then we can have discussions on the inside-outside rate and what the tax rates need to be in order to take care of all of the projects that we need to get done. I'll kind of leave that one at that for now. I think that that's probably going to be a different conversation when we get to that piece. And then the last part of the budget report that we did is just a demonstration of how all of what we have brought up in our little, in the subunits is really how it aligns with the strategic plan. Everything that we do should be aligned with the strategic plan. That was our roadmap. And where the strategic plan, we can see that those are the 5 columns, and the projects that we anticipate for 2025 are in line with that. And that's really the end of our report at this time. I realize that we're now going to go through it step by step. And again, I want to thank the administration for all of the work that they've done on this, and I hope we can have a fulsome conversation.
So in order to make sure that we follow a methodical approach to reviewing the budget, what I would propose is that each person make an opening comment. Each member of council make an opening comment, and then we'll follow through with the budget line by line with observations, comments, and your suggestions in terms of increases or decreases. Keeping in mind that we are limited. We do need to finish this meeting by 3 o'clock this afternoon. And with everybody's cooperation, I hope that we can achieve that. So I will ask that you keep your comments to a minimum as we first start, and then we'll go through the budget line by line. And perhaps just a clarifying question. In the budget workbook, are all of the line items identified that are in the budget? They are? Okay. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to skip over any line items and then find out later that they are in there. So, all right. So we'll start with Deputy Mayor Arrow in terms of any comments or initial comments you want to make before we go over the budget line.
Well, I guess just there's a few observations is that the proposed budget is significantly greater than last year, and last year's was significantly greater than the year before. So for instance, this year, the proposal that we're seeing is essentially what was just outlined there is in the order of a 20% increase over last year, which is significant. The implications to our tax rates are likely to be significant. And I think we're going to need to have a discussion about that. One thing that we haven't even mentioned all so far is some of the things that are in our control as council. That would be things like the use of the inside-outside rate, which is really the rate that is meant to address proximity of a service. The last 2 years, we were applying this concept to shared services. And so that the services were, in the most part, not equally shared. Some of them were equally shared, but for the most part, shared services were actually being paid with a discount for the LSD areas at 90% of actually what their share really was. They only were contributing 90%. This is a leftover from a concept that was basically implemented on us by the province. The other thing that we have control over is the premium that's paid for non-residential tax rate. As you know, with amalgamation, we have the opportunity as a municipal government to apply a premium of anywhere between 1.4 or 40% premium and 1.7, a 70% premium that's applied to any property that is non-residential. The last 2 years, we've been applying the maximum, 1.7. It's not even mentioned here so far, but in fact, I believe that the early proposal is requiring us to maintain at 1.7. I think it's worth mentioning information about how the tax rates changed. We haven't actually had any discussion about that, but to my knowledge, I believe the tax rate, pardon me, the tax base, I meant to say the tax base. The tax base for Fundy Albert has increased in 2025. Remember, the tax base is not at all in our control. This is based on the assessed values of properties. That is done by the province, Service of New Brunswick. I think we're seeing, and perhaps Mayor Sean can help, I think it was around 12.4 or 12.6, or perhaps our treasurer and CEO know 12.6 increase. So it means that even if we apply zero change to our tax rate, the property, most of our properties that each of us own as residents of Fundy Albert are probably going up in the order of 10%. I myself have not seen my property assessment over this year. I'm not sure if they've been sent out. So there is probably in the order of 10% like it was last year. So even if we keep our tax rate even, same as last year, we're all likely to be paying at least 10% more. But with a budget that's 20% more, I think it's probably indicative that the amount of money that we're likely to be faced with here in terms of an increase, if we adopt what's been presented, is in the order of 20%. And I think this is something that I know council members are going to want to discuss. I guess that's a start.
Okay, initial comments. Councillor Jones.
I'll keep this relatively short. When I received the package on the weekend, I went right to the bottom line of the tax rates, and I was quite discouraged when I seen proposed. But I choose to remain optimistic. And I'm going to use a word that Linda uses that just makes me smile every time I see it. The team at this table, I feel very confident that coming out Saturday afternoon, lunch at 5 o'clock, that we'll have this figured out, and it'll be a budget that we're all pleased and happy with. I'll just leave it at that for now.
All right, thank you, Councillor Jonah. Councillor Coates.
I see a lot of increases for the 3 municipalities. I don't see anything that's going to give the former LSDs anything. I've gone 2 years now. I realize that we have shared costs, but we're looking at fixing up rinks and everything like that. But I'm very disappointed in this budget. I'd like to see the LSDs, instead of increases, decreases. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. Councillor Land.
In the amalgamation that we started, wasn't our choice to come from the government. We've been handed infrastructure that's outdated in all 3 communities. We're behind. Probably everybody else is. But we are way behind in infrastructure. We've gone from basically a $3 million budget, we were all separate, to basically $6 million last year. We've doubled already. It's very concerning for me. The tax rates are high. In this budget, there's proposed to go even higher. I think we need, and we're going to go through line by line, and we've got to streamline somehow and figure out to get a handle on some of this in our spending. Maybe we're overspending in some places, maybe we're not. But we need to go through this very delicately and make a fine attempt to do that. Because healthcare went 9 cents last year, and we go another 9, 10 this year. That's a big increase. So I'm very concerned with the budget. I think we've got our work cut out for us going forward the next day or 2. So hopefully we can get this all packaged the other way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ward Russell.
Thank you. I guess I'll start with thank you to the administration team for their input in preparing this 2025 draft budget. So I've mentioned, I understand the need for regulation, but as a council, we need to be very careful where the dollars are spent. With the increase of assessments and NB power rates, this also must be taken into consideration. Just for information, Lower Cumberland's population is roughly 20%, but we're paying 37% of the budget. Overall, the last 3 years, our tax rate has increased over 40%. Finally, I'll end with I look forward to being able to walk proud with my head high in the community and let the residents know of Fundy Albert that we have listened.
Thank you. Councillor Albert.
Thank you. Just a couple things for me. Going into, as we go line by line, I'm going to be very interested to see exactly what each line number covers. I guess to narrow down exactly, there's numbers there, but what are the projects that we're aiming for, and what line items, what things in some of the higher administration costs is, what are those amounts covering? So it'll be interesting. The grants is going to be a big discussion for me. It looks like we've been very generous to the community of Fundy Albert in the past. We have a need, what it sees of our own infrastructure. So I think we have to find that balance, that maybe we need to pull back a little there. And, you know, not every community event needs to be on the taxpayers of Fundy Albert. And that's what the grant essentially is. So that's a big one. There's some big increases in theirs for me. To highlight Councillor Land's comment, you know, when I looked back at what the budget was for the former village of Riverside-Albert, we're way beyond that now, and so we do have to look at this very closely. We're small, we are large in space, but small in numbers in Fundy Albert. Identity, I think I want to thank the administration. They have prepared a very detailed budget, lots of information for us to review. But now basically it boils down for council to be able to narrow down and look and make the final decisions on our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellerton. So from my perspective, just a couple of comments, and reflect on some of the things that have been said. Deputy Mayor Arrow referred to the inside-outside rate of 9,100. That is presented as if it's shared at 100% by everyone in the current budget. That doesn't mean we have to adopt that. That's just a starting point. There was also in previous years a subsidy that was paid by the former 3 villages that was paid to keep the tax rates from climbing to the levels that they probably should have been in those years. So those subsidies in this budget have essentially disappeared. The tax base increase of 12.6% that you referred to in your comment, Deputy Mayor, reflects the increased assessments, but also new construction. So that has a tendency to drive it. I think it is actually closer to 10% increase in property values, but with the new construction, it increases our tax base. Shared costs, you know, I've heard a lot about shared costs, and I understand that some residents, particularly Councillor Coates, the folks in your ward, are against having to pay some of those shared costs. But let's not forget, as Councillor Land has pointed out, that this was a decision of the provincial government. This was not a decision by this council, and we are bound to that. That a shared cost is a shared cost. How we treat those shared costs is up to us. As far as the Southeast Regional Service Commission budgets, our treasurer has presented a number of costs that are within the Southeast Regional Service Commission that will see some increases in some, decreases in the other. I'd like to point out that the overall effect on the Fundy Albert budget is an actual decrease of 2.81% from last year for when you consider all the mandated and non-mandated costs. That doesn't include regional garbage collection. But for all mandated and non-mandated costs that are paid by Fundy Albert, that includes Eco360, a reduction from $56 per household to $44 per household. That represents a regional decrease for Fundy Albert of 2.81%. And lastly, I really want to commend the staff and our CAO, the treasurer, and the entire management team for putting this document together. This is by far the most information that we've had to address our budget deliberations in the past. And I hope, as I said before, that this sets the bar for us going forward. I'm optimistic that if we look at the budget line by line, we come up with some suggestions that are realistic, that we'll be able to reduce that overall impact on our budget. So those are all the comments that I have to make. So I'm hoping that everyone approaches this with an open mind and we have some good two-way constructive discussion, and that we provide some direction to our administrative team so that they can go back and make the adjustments to this budget. It won't be sufficient to say we need to reduce by this. It will need to have, the conversation needs to be had is we need to reduce by this, and this is where we propose it come from. Because there are some of these costs that are fixed costs. Policing has gone up by $200,000. Regional waste collection has gone up by, I believe it's just under $200,000. Those are pretty much fixed costs. There's nothing we can do about that. And those, unfortunately, we have to pay, we pass along to the taxpayer. What we do have control over is some of the variable costs and services that we provide. But if we decide to reduce those, there are typically some implications, and that's where we're going to rely on our staff to say, well, if you do this, this will be the implication. So that we go into this with both eyes wide open, and we know what the implications are for our municipality. So that's all I'll say for the time being. So thank you very much. So if we want to go back up to the top of the budget, we'll begin. I don't know if it's necessary for us to talk about the revenues per se, because those would probably be pretty much set. Although some folks may have some questions about revenue. So rather than go over the revenue line by line, maybe we can just go around the table and see if anybody has any specific questions about any of the revenue line items, unless you want to go through them line by line.
No, I do have a couple questions about the revenue section.
Do you want to go over them line by line, or just specific questions that you want to answer?
Specific question.
Okay, so we'll do that. We'll go around the table first, and Deputy Mayor, do you have any questions about revenues?
Certainly just a comment for one, just so we're all aware, because it's not specific. The value was hinted at here under revenue about the community funding grant. This is the grant that the province gives us. Used to be called the equalization grant. This grant has been going down steadily since amalgamation. So last year it was almost $243,000 that was essentially given by the province to our municipality to offset expenses. This year it's down to $213,527, I believe, which is the order of 12% decrease. So we're faced with that. So the province is squeezing us continuously. We know that, but our residents need to know that, and that's one thing. I see that there's a number of areas, like we see that costs are going up for virtually everything.
Well, can you concentrate on revenues right
Yeah.
now? Okay. Yeah.
I'm
sorry. Okay.
So costs are going up everywhere. But some of our user fees are being proposed to remain the same. I believe that, in fact, for the pool, is it true that you're proposing that that is a disconnect for me. I know we've been doing this in the past, actually. The last couple of years, we also did not do user fee increases, even for the rink, I think. I believe this year we're seeing a user fee increase for the rink. I think it's the right thing to do. So I think we're going to need to do some thinking about that. I also see that there's no increase, for instance, some of our rental spaces. And it just because everything else is costing more money, it's odd to me that our user fees aren't going up. And lastly, I guess that's it for me for right now. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Just one thing, in regards to the arena, we're looking at a deficit of over 21,000 projected. Is that caused possibly by the extended season and the expenditures going against the arena? Just with that? So is that okay right now?
Could we focus on revenues? If you have any questions specific
Under
to
revenues, that's fine.
Oh, reduction in revenues from the arena?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, by the extension, did that affect us?
It absolutely does. The extension of the season does make a difference. We don't actually bring in enough in the revenues on the extension of the season to cover the cost that it takes to run it for the additional time. But to kind of both of those points for the pool and the arena, we are planning on doing a study in the coming year to really analyze what our costs are on these and what user fees then should be in order to, so what is hydro going to cost on it? We don't have reports like that. So we really wanted to do an in-depth analysis of the facilities, what needs to be upgraded, what's our long-term plan of equipment in it. Like there's a lot of factors involved, and it's just information we don't have right now. So we need to do that in the coming year, which would be why we didn't recommend an increase, because once we figure all this out, we can then come back with a more fulsome report and a recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jonah. Councillor Coates.
Only one question on the animal 500. Does that cover the whole Fundy Albert?
Yes.
So
And And it all depends on which contractor we've gone with. We've only received a number from MBSBCA. We're still waiting to hear back from Pause, but essentially we will go with one that's more economical for our community. But we may lose that revenue depending on which provider. Because currently, with the Pause contract that's in place in the former villages, that's for revenue we get off dog tags, registration on kennels, and fines that are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Council Land?
Just one comment, on the revenue side, I think comments that are made previous with other councilors about watching rentals and what it costs to operate different facilities. I think that's a necessity going forward.
Mhm.
All businesses run on profit, so there's a run on profit. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Ward Russell.
Thank you. Just one question on recycling products, the 92,000. Just curious if you know the number of houses that were being paid for.
I don't know right offhand, but I can have that number for you for Saturday. So that's for the amount of households.
Yeah, I'm just curious if, when you compare that to the expense side of things, just wondering if we're being paid the right amount of money for revenue versus the amount of money that we're being charged on solid waste collection and their expenses.
Yeah, so it goes by, it's a shared revenue, so we would basically go to each subunit or community based on what their assessment is.
We'll look that up and have an answer on Saturday for sure.
Okay, and I guess, it's nice to see that some rates are going up, but it would have been nice to maybe have those rates go up. We're missing a season, we've already missed 2 seasons, so it would be nice if we could have had those rates advertised, I think, some more money for 2025, but that will be 2026 before we see.
To that point, we needed to wait until this season. We would have had to put those in place in May in order to have it affect this season, especially with hockey, so.
That's it for me.
Thank you. Councilor Albert.
Yeah, most of my comments have kind of been covered, but the revenue side, although I appreciate the fact that we don't have an exact expense for some of these facilities, we do know that we're running a deficit each year. So I'm not sure why we're not including that a little bit as an increase in our revenue. We know the pool doesn't make us any money, and yet we're budgeting a lot of money to go into it. So to not have it, I'd sooner see small increases than wait and have one huge increase. I'd sooner see it go gently, the same as Councillor Ward Russell had mentioned, the same with the arena. We missed the opportunities on the arena now every budget year. So I see that it is increasing next year, but we've missed this whole season basically. So those are just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Alderton. I don't really have any questions per se as far as revenue is concerned. Maybe we can, sorry.
Excuse me, I apologize, but I did have one other question. It pertained to fire services provided to others, which is the rural districts. I noticed in the proposal here, it's changing 0, but you've made a comment,
Yeah.
Jillian, that it was going up by 3%, I think.
Yes, so in a dream world, if I would have got my financial statements on time from our auditors, we would have had more of an increase. But unfortunately, the province is giving him the allowance of 3%. But he is also going to look into the sharing the cost of the new fire truck.
Yeah, because, this seems completely unfair on the part of the province or whoever is assigning this. Because, for instance, the fire expense that Riverview's charging us is going up, I'd have to check, but 20% or more.
70,000, I want to say.
But say 20%. And our fire costs are going up in the order of 20%. And yet the revenue that someone's going to pay us for us providing that service is going up maybe max 3%. That we need to push back, in my view, as a municipality.
All right, thank you. So we'll now jump to the expense side of the budget conversation, and we'll go over line by line. So yes, I could defer to you, Savrin, in terms of going over line by line, or I can take the lead and call them out one by one. I can do that.
Either way.
So, line item 2.1.1.1.1, which is the mayor personnel. These are the costs associated with the mayor's salary. Are there any suggested changes to that?
Could I just say something in general about that?
Yes.
We're standing here talking about cut where we can to make this work. I might be speaking for myself, but personally think this is the first place we start, and that we do not accept cost of living raises as mayor's personnel for 2025. This is my thought.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have a similar idea in the sense that there's, in my view, maybe before we start going line by line, we need to have some maybe broader discussions among council here. This would be a good example of one. The whole notion about cost of living increases for both the councils and for staff is clearly a subject that has tremendous implications throughout. Also, for each line in the expenses, there's the idea of sharing, because that's part of what's in every line, right? Is it shared or not? And if it is shared, how is it shared? Is it equally shared? Is there some, others from the community have used a term sliding scale before. We have the inside-outside rate concept. So these are fundamental questions that we need to be addressing that apply to every line in this.
Okay. Well, we could have that conversation right now in terms of sliding scale. So right now, as it's presented in the budget, the sliding scale is presented straight across the board, 100% for all subunits. So we can have that conversation in isolation, recognizing that if there is a 90-100 sliding scale, that it will likely increase the tax rate in some of the municipalities and lower them in others. So let's talk about that. So you want to have one, and then we can talk about the 2.38% increase. But as I mentioned in my opening comments, we are not going to get into specific positions and or salary positions.
Well, I think we need to make sure that we're all on the same page of even what we're talking about. So we know that some expenses are considered to be shared, which means that at least at face value, all of our taxpayers are somehow contributing to that expense. Up until in previous years, for instance, 2024 and 2023, when we said that an expense was shared, it was either equally shared among all residents, or it was equally shared among only the former villages, or it was shared among everyone but not equally. And there was the application of the so-called sliding scale or inside outside. And when we talk about sharing, it's not by household, and it's not even actually by assessed value. It's actually by the ratio of tax base in a subunit versus the entire. And so that includes the concept of the non-residential 1.4 to 1.7. So this leads to one of my first questions, actually, just about how we do.
And in the interest of time, I'd ask you to try to get through it because we're scheduled to go until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Okay.
No, I'm just,
These are fundamental.
I know you're getting to a point, but let's get to the point and make your statement in terms of what your preference is.
Well, first off, the tax base, I submitted that comment in writing.
Mm-hmm.
The tax base numbers that are being provided to us are not consistent. So which one, so I mentioned that in a letter, in a question submitted yesterday, I said the tax base numbers for the 8 different subunits are inconsistent in tab 1 and tab 5. Which one is correct?
Because the tabs that you're discussing is a budget tool that I use. And when I originally started doing the budget, I didn't have the assessment numbers. So the numbers that are in that calculator is when I was first starting with the budget. So I've gone back and I've used a separate calculator in a different form page that I have from the province, and I've calculated them there. So basically, it's essentially my scribbles.
Yeah, so
Tab 5 is just you can plug
okay,
numbers in and
so
play
tab
around with it.
tab
Yeah.
1 is.
So tab 1 would be the one that has the information. Tab 5, you can play around
Yeah,
with it
okay,
and see
that's
what
all.
pops out,
Okay.
right?
So what I believe is that the concept of a sliding scale that was implemented by the province, the so-called inside-outside rate, it was implemented to address the notion of proximity to a service. And I believe that that notion has merit. In some cases, and it doesn't have merit in other places. So the best example where I believe it has merit would be fire. So the idea was, up until this year, that the villages were paying the inside rate. They were paying their full share because the fire stations were in their villages. And the LSD areas, which none of them had a fire station, were paying the outside rate, a reduced rate. I believe that for fire, that is legitimate. There were other things that last year we made a decision that it wasn't legitimate and they should be equally shared. 2 good examples of that were the tipping fee. In other words, if my bag of garbage from Alma goes to the solid waste facility and you drop it, should actually cost not the collection fee or the cost to get it there, but just to drop it. My bag of garbage should be no different than the bag of garbage from an LSG area. And so last year we made those equally shared. Another good example was cost of assessment. So we did that last year. So I advocate for that. But there are things like fire, and I would even argue recreation maybe, which we didn't. Well, we did apply inside outside rate. So I think we need to have a real discussion.
So you're supporting the inside outside rate or not?
I'm partially supporting it. Yes, I am.
All right, thank you. Councillor Jones,
Yeah, I've got nothing at this time.
support inside outside or not?
I'm going to go ahead partially. There's places where it should be, there's places where it shouldn't be. That's more discussion than there.
Thank you. Councillor Coates,
I don't support
inside outside. So, well, by saying that, you're saying that you agree to it equally across the board.
No,
That
the opposite.
just exactly. So you do support the inside outside rate. In fact, I think you would support something more than the inside outside rate.
Yes.
I think which is your position. Councillor Land,
I support the inside outside.
thank you. Councillor Russell.
Yeah, no, I would definitely support at least to say the 90%. We have said multiple times that we're not ready for equalization, which also includes the inside out rate. So I would not be supporting anything more than 90%.
Thank you. Councillor Albert.
I'm kind of looking for an explanation of why it was switched in the budget presentation. Like what was the theory behind the switch? Because it was switched during this budget.
Well, last year, we had gone through and some of them were shared 100%, some were inside, outside. As administration, I can give you the costs, but I'm not a counselor and it's not my position to decide who gets inside, outside rate. And
There seems to be a larger conversation happening about sliding scales and inside outside rates. Putting it all at 100% on this means that we can have this conversation and we can go back, make the adjustment that we need to do based on your decisions and come back with a new budget on Saturday. That was the goal of it.
Okay.
So have the discussion so public is aware of what I think a lot of people maybe aren't aware of what the inside outside rate is. And then how that on a sliding scale, is there a matchup with, are we doing both? How do we do both? Again, it was for conversation purposes and as a starting point for discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. For what it's worth, I'm supportive of an outside rate. The one kind of question I had around the outside rate and policing was probably one of the more representative examples of that. The policing costs last year were attributed by subunits, whereas this year it's attributed, it's a one lump sum number or shared. So that's it's a different application. I'm just kind of wondering if there was, because we're just getting a one number from, or are you just dealing with the estimate based on the website information that you attribute? Because I believe in last year's budget, I don't know who provided us that number, it was by subunit.
Yes. So what I was provided from the province last year was separated by subunit, but where I've not received anything yet, I'm just basing it on shared for now,
Okay.
until I have those correct numbers.
Right. So I think there are some elements of the budget, I believe, that are kind of, they're either late coming to us or they're not been communicated officially. And I believe policing, as an example, is an estimate of, based on the information that's available on a website, it's an estimate of what we believe our costs may end up being. So we need to be mindful of that. And there are other examples where we didn't get some definitive responses to some questions. They've been highlighted in here. But generally speaking, I'm open to an inside-outside rate. I am not open to the idea of a further sliding scale based on proximity, because it is fraught with complications and challenges. All right. So go ahead.
So to clarify, we're all in favor of an inside-outside rate and you would like us to adjust the budget to 100 to 90.
That is my sense.
Okay, so we need clarification on that.
That's no,
With some provisions, but we need to be specific about the provisions. I don't want us to get mired in the weeds of a lot of those conversations, because then if we can fine tune that on Saturday. If we end up having too many in the weeds conversations, we won't get through this today.
Would you prefer if we go line by line, that then the recommendation can be is this, we can talk line by line and say this and this.
So I'll use my terminology that I used a few minutes ago. The inside-outside rate is applied to a shared service, but it clearly is not equally shared. I will use the term equally shared when there is no inside-outside rate. And so last year, we applied some shared services as equally shared and other ones as inside-outside. I am advocating for this year, we do the same, similar.
Okay, that's fine, that's fair. And we can do those line by line when we get to them. All right, so I think the answer to your question is yes, we are in favor of a 90 to 100 inside-outside rate. The other conversation that can be had right now, I guess, is the whole idea of, and I believe that you wanted to have the conversation about it, the suggested cost of living increase.
Yeah, so I think as in any group that's creating any budget that includes human resources costs, salary costs, we need to be looking at our results. We need to be ready to look at the results. What would be our end result if our cost of living was zero? And the cost of living, if I understand correctly, that's being proposed in the budget proposal for both the council and for staff is 2.38%. Is that right? Yeah. So I think it would be to our advantage that we're ready, that administration's ready at any moment to show us the numbers, the bottom line numbers, you know, what, where, if it was zero or the 2.38, and then that would be easy for us to know what those bounds are. Like last year, for instance, it was zero. It was zero for both council and staff. It was zero. This year, so if we knew that both of them are ready to have those bottom lines, then we easily can say, what can we afford?
what about the idea that we already know that the rates are going up considerably or could go up considerably? What is your starting position on a 2.38% cost of living increase?
Too expensive. That's what I'm saying. I'm seeing $1.2 million increase, 20% increase. I think it's indicative that there's a bunch of stuff here that are too expensive because many of the things, as we've already discussed, we have no control over. Big numbers like the police, but there's others. So this is one of the few numbers we can control.
So you're almost suggesting that there be none.
Well, I'm suggesting we need to look at that. What's the difference?
Okay. Councillor Jonah.
I'm going to stick to what I originally said. I think we as council need to lead by example and start by trimming with ourselves and not accept this. As far as the rest of the staff, it's a conversation needs to be had. And our CAO and our admin team is kind of on top of that. But as far as council, I would stick to it that we declined 2.3 whatever and stick with what you signed up to do this.
Thank you. Councillor Coates.
I agree with the 2.3% increase in a lot of the subunits, but I think the mayor and councillors should waive the 2.3 in good faith to the taxpayers.
Thank you. Councillor Land.
I think the mayor's council need to stay at a 0% increase, stay where we are. For staffing goes, I'd like to see a combination of 1.38% increase and a 2.38%. Just to see the difference in the numbers, if it's a big number or a small number, but in that range of increase.
Thank you. Councillor Ward Russell.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with almost everybody. I don't want to see an increase in the mayor and the councillors' per diem retainer. I guess when it comes to the overall 2.38% inflation or rate, I am not in favor of that. But I would be open to see a scale of 1% to 1.5%, and to see what the difference in the overall budget would be on that. At this time, though, I'd be more leaning to a 1% increase.
Thank you. Councillor Elderton.
I do agree with what the rest of the councillors are saying, and I certainly support not giving the cost of living increase to the mayor and councillors.
Thank you. For what it's worth, I'm also view that mayor and council should not receive an increase. In fact, I think if you compare us to other municipalities, we're probably overpaid in terms of what other municipalities are paying mayor and councillor. So maybe that's something we need to reflect on. But I would definitely, obviously, I think the suggestion is that we prepare a number of scenarios with how much of an increase 1.0 would be. None, obviously, but 1%, 2%, or a number of different scenarios. You want
I
to say
will
something?
say, I just a confirming, but I believe the cost of living was higher than 2.38, and we were landing on 2.38 as a suggestion. And the cost of losing staff and training new staff is maybe higher than 2.38%. But we're glad we're going to come back with some statistics and some information.
And for what it's worth, I'm of the view that staff did not get an increase last year. They deserve a 2.38%, which is the recommendation by our administration. So thank you. So we've gone over, so mayor personnel, so if I understand correctly, that should be reduced back to a 0% increase. I don't know whether the mayor other would be reduced as a result of that, probably.
No, it hasn't increased or decreased this
Okay,
year.
perfect. Councilors' personnel would also be reduced accordingly to the 0%. Councilors' other would not increase. Development seminars at $2,000. What are the council's thoughts on that? So these are development seminars, and maybe the treasurer can clarify.
There's different courses that are provided through
Council? Are there any comments in relation to that amount, which is $2,000? I'm not seeing any.
How much, sorry?
It's mayor development seminars, which was 2,000 in 2024. The amount being proposed is $2,000 in 2020. Yes,
Did we only spend $100 last year? Is that what that is saying to us?
yes.
And so we're asking for another 2,000. I think that could be cut then.
No, they're asking just for it to remain the same.
But if we only spent $100 last year. So where does UMNB come out of?
I think what their treasurer is suggesting is if there's any training offered by UMNB, then that should be,
Or service commission was.
or service commission or something else.
Yeah, I would cut that.
Reduce at least.
I would agree. I don't think we need to, because there's other places budget for training and stuff, and I think there's.
That would be training for staff. So
So
this is training for.
Well, we were talking about budget, not taking a raise, and that we're higher paid than some of the rest. If we want more training, maybe we can put it in a pocket.
Anyone else have any comments? So I would suggest bringing that down to 0 based on the comments that I've heard. Other legislative services. So that amount is the same as what was proposed. Any comments in terms of what that covers?
What do we pay the $5,036 for 24?
The big cost for, our assistant clerk. And also, we bought new mics for the owl, but I can get a more in depth if you require one.
Well, it's just looking like one is way under budget and one's over budget, so it may just be a matter of moving some numbers around there, because obviously we spent whatever was in there. And is it still, I'm just trying to find the printout here on the, under the expenses. Sorry.
Yeah, because I did review it, like, we don't really foresee costs for the assistant clerk as we have a plan. We're working in place for 2025.
I'm just trying to read the description of it here. I'm just trying to scroll down, sorry.
We're talking about other legislative services.
Yes, so the definition says council meeting costs, hours, and so are these ongoing costs? So if the ongoing costs are gonna remain as 5,000.
So the L of the Zoom is a fixed, that's already been spent. It's not going to cost us anymore after that.
Okay.
So that would have come out of this budget. That won't be coming out of next year's budget as an example. But if we have to rent spaces, so if we have to go,
Even though I.
renting them, like, oh, sorry, like, am I not talking?
Wouldn't this system be actually up? Right here.
Right, so in the future, if we purchase a couple of these once in a while, that would come out of that line item?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
So are we recommending that stay the same? The recommendation from administration is that it remain the same. Not hearing any objection. Manager, administrator personnel, that is, I believe, a fixed cost. That has the 2.38% built into it.
For that one, we'd have to discuss in camera as it pertains to personnel for me to answer that question.
Well, this will be all relative to.
Yeah, they're all,
So coming back with that 2 point, the
Yeah.
chart of what you want to see.
right.
Yeah, so we'll come back
Okay.
with the salary and what the.
So then we have others like clerk personnel, human resources, other, which would be, I would assume, additional staffing or temp help or.
So we have not asked for additional staffing in the budget. We've just asked for the cost of living.
Okay, thank you. Office buildings is showing a decrease. Those are for the office,
It's just the 3
the
offices.
3 offices.
It doesn't
that we
include-
Still currently own that we have to pay expenses for.
Yeah, it does not include 2849 no more.
And also remember, apologies, the current position.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'd like to get through this side of it before we have a quick recess.
I understand. I have a
Go ahead.
question because we've stepped over a line.
Yeah.
Human resource other.
Mhm.
What does that, is that include like our HR on call, like that?
Yes. So
Is
it would include HR on call, some anticipated costs, maybe with direct deposit, and recruiting. So if we did happen to have staff leave, we do have a budget to advertise for positions.
So direct deposit, HR, call, and.
But did I miss something here about the clerk role, or did we actually talk
We're
about?
not talking about individual positions. It's all part of the salaries are there. It's a part of the.
I'm not talking about the amount, but the 212.1.3 clerk personnel.
Mhm.
That role, and maybe I missed something there, Julian, was, like, we don't have, that's not a staff position right now, is it?
Currently, no.
Contract.
The deputy clerk position.
No, the assistant, our administrative
Right, so
assistant.
The slippage from in HR was used for other resources this year. So we have a admin person in the office that some of that salary was used for. What was the other salaries that were used in that slippage, HR slippage?
We put them to the pool.
Well, this is
Because even if we hired someone at the time that the pool opened, there was still enough slippage to cover for the pool. Even if we hired that person that, what was budgeted at that time.
Well, this is linked to a question I submitted also yesterday, or maybe it was the day before. That, as we see even on this page right here, last year there was an amount on this line for a clerk, and it was never staffed. So that money, my question was from yesterday, the day before, is what happened to that money?
We can come back with a full report if you'd like to see exactly where all of the,
We shouldn't be discussing individual positions and who got hired and what position got hired. Suffice it to say that the clerk was never hired. The plan still is to hire a clerk, and council has provided direction to the chief administrative officer to hire our assistant clerk. That's where that will go.
Okay, so we can talk about it later, but it's linked to my question. So the 69,000 from 2024, we need to know where that went.
Which will be shown in committee of the whole today when I present my projection.
Sure.
All right. So let's try to finish up the salaries aspect of it. So we
we run office buildings. We
for office buildings, I think we got a response for office buildings.
And I had a question on the office buildings, or it's more of a statement. So remember, we did have a proposal put before council at the last meeting that the Riverside-Albert office be not sold and instead leased. So that will make some changes in here as well, I believe.
But to that,
Could generate revenue.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
No.
Yes, look, just a second. Yes, Councillor Ward Russell.
back up to the human resources other. Are we still using HR on call?
We're not. We could consider canceling it.
$62 a month.
Yeah, it's not a significant cost, and I've weighed the, is it good to have just in case? Is it not? If you'd like, we can kind of maybe put some pros and cons together for Saturday if you want to see.
Yeah, I would like, I mean, I'm looking for every penny, so, direct deposit, and what was the other, HR and call direct deposit?
Recruiting, it's quite expensive, more than you would like.
It's very expensive to.
I want to say,
we can.
yeah, about 2 or 3 grand we had to spend this year, so.
I just think there is some room for movement in the decrease, for 5201. I think that number can be reduced. And I would suggest that we're not using HR, and if you think you might need it, then we can look at getting it at some point, but, I don't believe that we should be paying for something that we're not using.
but we are still paying for it at this time.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, office buildings, was there anything else? I think you were talking about office buildings. Deputy Mayor?
So if I understand correctly, part of why it's reduced from almost 95 last year to 77 this year is because, in fact, the library building has been reassigned into another line item.
Correct.
Does the 77 here include, did I see somewhere that a parking lot was going to get paved?
That was part of our plan for the, our office at 61 Academy. We didn't do that. We're still pending our discussions with an interested party to rent the other side of the space, in which we can then look at that as a whole project instead of just, so we're kind of making do now.
So the
And I believe in
77,
the recommendations of the committee of the whole report, that's
Yeah.
addressed as well.
It's addressed later in my projections.
But does the 77 include a paid parking lot?
No.
No, perfect. Thank you.
Legal services, $25,000. So I did have a question there. So what's the cause of the difference in the year projection of what we're projecting in 2025? There's a significant difference. And so is that realistic in terms of what our audit for 2025 would be?
There's only.
Oh, legal services, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2,500,
Oh, okay.
and we've already, projecting.
No, I'm sorry. My comment was in relation to the other one above. So we spent much more on office buildings last year than we did in this, that we're projecting for this year.
Yeah, and that's just every class of one of the buildings.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions about legal services? It's projected to increase slightly, and our expenses right now are 23,401.
To that point, we do have, we did receive a grant that we could use for legal services for easements and for the writing of our bylaws. So we haven't done a lot of that this year, so we don't see that affecting this budget line. But if we can find some economy somewhere, we of course will.
Okay. Other administrative services?
I did have a question about this line item. It's had about a $20,000 increase from last year. And I know I think during your report earlier, you had suggested branding, promotion, and website.
Mm-hmm.
But did we not already do the branding for Fundy Albert? And our website is up and running. So is this?
So there's recurring costs with keeping the website, and when we make changes to it, branding, we're still, what we got for grants is not going to cover new signage on all our buildings and facilities, and promotions. It's just, so when, for example, like the Canadian Mental Health Guide, they want us to put an advertisement in their page, or the Alberta County Exhibition to put a new sign up with our branding, that would come out of there.
So what is the big increase from last year?
Well, it's 15,000 that I put in for those items.
Right. And
The sign alone is, I believe it's 15,000.
No, it's in a different one.
Oh, that's in a different line.
Yeah.
So
Can we cut that back a little bit?
well, my question is, what's the cost to maintain the website? Is that something we do internally, or is that something somebody else does? We make all the changes and maintain the website?
The part of the branding exercise in the, with the black advertising is that there was continual improvements on the site that they do. So Kim does a lot of the work internally, but they do some of the major, if you need a reconstruction of a page or something new added in, they do it. It is part of, it was part of that agreement, but there is, I think it's at 1,700. or $1,800, yeah, it's a small amount for that maintenance. There's certain stuff that we just don't have capability of doing, those major stuff, but the regular posting of minutes and videos and that stuff is done internally.
So what else is in that account? Because
So that would be mileage for administrative staff.
we're way over budget, first of all, in our year-to-date for this year.
Hmm.
Right? But that's without the extra promotion and signage and such. So is there anything in there that we can tone down a little bit, I guess? Not knowing exactly what's in there. So one question is, it's $1,800 to maintain the website and mileage for staff. For administration, I'm assuming that's only for administration.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this is one we could get a more detailed list of what exactly, rather than
Certainly.
pull the process up here.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you have a question?
And linked to that, the Voyant Alert, do we pay for that?
Yes, we do.
It's a very minimal cost. It's not very expensive.
Like more than $1,000?
Yeah, it's for it's around 3,000, I believe. I'd have
So
to look at
it got
the-
me thinking that, and I'm a proponent of Voyant Alert, I'm a user. But I don't ever recall council actually making a decision to do that. Was that was just something that administration just did on their own?
Part of my role as a CAO is to communicate with the public, and that was one of the methods that we had chosen to do. So I believe that was within my range of available funding in order to make those decisions. We put that in place. We came to council with it in a committee of the whole report a couple of times.
Yeah, I didn't realize at the time that it was causing, so there's a broader question here about communication or communications, right? That we see it in our strategic plan and in the feedback we get from the community, that communications is a very important thing and probably one we need to be better at. What I do find bizarre of the budget template that's provided to us by the province with the chart of accounts, that there's no line for communication. Is this where it's buried, or is it buried in several places?
Yeah, it would be in there, like our costs, like this year, any newsletter we had to put out would kind of be buried in there, because that's like a part of our office costs.
Well, this also got me thinking about, in other years, this year, and I think last year, we paid money to Connecting Albert County to help us communicate. But I never saw anything about Connecting Albert County in here. So I wasn't sure, are we continuing this or not? So the broader issue that or request I would have to you, and this falls on for Councillor Eldican, is this particular item. I would like to see a better breakdown of what this actually is. And linked to that is I'd like to see a breakdown about communications in particular.
Okay.
And if it's all just in here, okay. But if it's spread out, I'd like to just see what we're doing there, please.
So part of our strategic plan, I mean, then there's a lot of stuff that goes into that strategic plan. And it's a 2024 to 2020.
No, I get that.
Yeah, so we will be coming out in the new year with our tactical plan, and now we're going to realize those goals, and communications definitely one of them.
Yeah, but I mean, for 2025, what's our communications budget?
All right, thank you. The next
I do
two,
have a question.
yes, Councilor Russell.
I guess just to repeat a little bit what Deputy Mayor Bureau has said, I'd like to see a detailed breakdown from 2024 as well as the detail for 2025. It is a large expense, so I need to see more how that is broken down. And just a question on mileage. Who is the mileage paid to and why?
That would be paid for, just me and my assistant, if we're doing a special trip for a deposit.
So
very
minimal.
It's very minimal.
CAO not being that, and Director of Operations
No, that'd be different.
and different.
Yeah. Yeah, so and like we don't use the full, usually I try to make the deposit when I'm already going to Moncton to eliminate costs.
But that would be shown in your detailed report for 24 and 25.
Thank you. Let's get this finished so we can have a break. Finance and administration personnel and accounting personnel, those are included in the suggested increases. Accounting other, 7,500. It's a reduction from the budgeted amount of 15,000, more in line with the projected expenses. So yes, Deputy Mayor.
I do have a question about finance personnel. Because we have the two people. I just was thinking back to pre-amalgamation. So in pre-amalgamation, in Alma, it was the accounting and finance was just part of one person. I'm pretty sure it was the same in Riverside-Albert, Councillor Eldican, that finance was just part of one person. In Hillsborough, maybe it was part of two people.
Yes. Mostly part of one and part of a second.
Okay.
And mostly one part of a second.
Okay.
All right. Accounting other.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure I know it's been dropped by half, and when I looked back to last year, there was an allowance in there for some assistance, I think. But is that now required at all because we have someone in a position?
Not as much. This year, kind of what was used is when we had to pay for certain accounting services for the finishing of different audits. And also this year, we're working with E6. So, I mean, with E6, we may be able to cut that all together. We still haven't finished our final meetings. We're supposed to meet with them, I believe, next week.
And what is,
So we presented to the E6 at the committee, the last committee as a whole. We said we've engaged with an outside company that's helping us to look at what our processes are in finance and coming up with a gap analysis and a plan moving forward for how better report our finances to committee as a whole and council, et cetera.
so that's what that
Yeah,
is being accounted to.
yeah, 'cause there may be, he suggested different programs, but I mean, we haven't made no changes yet, but,
So is there any flexibility there to lower that a little bit more? I mean, it's not a big amount, but it's a,
yeah, I like to have a quick discussion with, our contact with E6. But I believe we could probably cut that in half again.
All right, thank you. It is now 5 minutes to 1. I would suggest we take a short 15-minute recess for anybody who wants to use facilities or a quick bite to eat. Everyone in favor of that?
yes.
So we will recess and reconvene at 1:10 p.m. So thank you, everyone. Now reconvene. Thank you. All right, so now we're getting into the items other than the official part. So our first item is external audit and accounting fees. I think this is where I was coming from. I mistakenly commented on the last time through legal expenses. Our projections were 59,590 and we're budgeting 25,000 for 2025. Is that realistic given the size of?
Because this also includes 2 other audits that were completed and paid for that were not approved in the previous years.
That's the only comment I have. Anyone else have any comments about audit?
Do we have a quote that lines up with this?
He said around 18,000, so I've given some room in case there is.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Roberts.
Who's he? Is it the same auditor?
Yeah, that's done.
Should we not be looking to see, doing an RFP to see what, other firms might be willing to do for us?
In space of time.
We can consider it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that you would, want to see, at least get a quote from 2 or 3 different auditing firms to see what,
I'm not to interrupt you, sorry, Councilor Russell, but it was quite difficult just to find this auditor. But if we put it out an RFP through MUM, we may be able to find different providers.
Right, because we must admit that Fundy Albert has struggled since day one to get any audit even close to being not way overdue.
We've been told that this is a common theme. It's not just Fundy Albert, it's happening everywhere.
It's pathetic.
Yeah, I
For professional organizations.
Let's be mindful that we're in a public meeting, Councilor, and be mindful of our comments and the implications of our comments. So thank you. Purchasing under.
there's a significant, sorry. It's a significant increase, but it's based on our spending. So if we make cuts, it will cut, but it will only cut because I have a calculation through our table that we personally use in the office, and it calculates what the possible net HST based on light items that have HST in them.
So if I understand correctly, when we purchase the actual cost of the item goes to the line item for the item.
Correct.
The net HST amount goes to this line.
Yes.
And that shows up as an expense, which is net HST, which is the part that we end up paying that we don't get recovered.
Correct.
Okay, so makes sense. Yes.
So how do you determine which is shared versus informed or
I
separate?
have it set to calculate items that are shared and non-shared.
And can you tell us, at some point, I think this for me is another one very similar to other administrative services and what purchasing others actually covers in a yearly basis.
Anyone else? Councilor Russell?
So can I assume that this means that there'll be more expenses, more purchases done if that number is higher?
Yes.
So could we get a detailed of what you expect those purchases to be?
It would just be like our basic line items. So say like, let me just pick one.
I think it's probably
Yeah,
best
like-
just to give us
Yeah.
a detailed list of what's included and what you're expecting it to be for 2020.
We're not gonna be able to tell you exactly what that's gonna be for 2025. I mean, it depends on what we purchase, right? So, although we can guesstimate based on, what we've done in the past, it's not gonna be an exact.
Well, it's basically what we're gonna budget in 20, or we're budgeting to spend in 2025. So say we cut a line item that has HST attached that has $20,000, we're gonna see a savings of $3,000, or not 3,000, but the corresponding net HST for that amount.
No, I'm not disagreeing with anything. I think $54,000, I think it's a huge increase on this line item.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at what our year-end projections are, it's not very far off.
More information to come. Civic relations, proposing $10,000.
Which I believe is the same as last year, which covers,
The public meeting, so when you guys went up for strat plan, so all the building rentals that are covered, you do copy and tea for, those presentations, budget presentations, when we go out in the community and rent spaces, the amounts, anything kind of put on by council is covered under that one.
Councilor Russell?
It just seems a little high. I mean, if you're looking at 12 meetings a year, then $200 on average, and that would only be about $2,400. Coffee and tea, throw another few $100 in there, but I think 10,000 is a little high.
Well, considering our expenses today are 97.32, I think it's.
So maybe I could see a breakdown, because I do find that even, like, I'm trying to think of where we've actually had our meetings and why that number would be as high as it is.
Maybe a list.
Yeah.
Thank you. Training and development. It's showing a significant increase.
I think this has been already explained, that we want to invest in our people.
So that would
this
be
year.
part of that as well.
so I do have a question on that. Is, I think I read in there, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm flipping back and forth here, going up and down, but I think you average $2,000 per employee. Do you, and I know you came up with this number, but does that seem a bit high coming from a facility that has I think that's a very high number for every employee.
So as an example, I was supposed to be on a course today, which I can't, so we did get a refund, and it was a $500 course, and it was done through the University of Moncton. So I know that the level class, the class 3 drivers was $1,700. So there's a range in there. So we're looking at an average of $2,000 per employee, because we figured that would maybe be 4 courses. If the team needs to take flag person training, that's done. You know, we don't have enough to make a class. We have to then join classes somewhere else. Sometimes it means we have to send them somewhere to do it. So it's about on average, we were averaging 500 per class of something, which would be 4, which is like 1 per quarter. They're not online. Online courses are awareness sessions. We don't need online. We need a combination of. We can do health and safety courses online. We can do awareness, things like that. These are to increase the skill set within the public works department, so we can have cost savings elsewhere when we're doing our own projects instead. We did lose, as Ian had mentioned earlier, we did lose some knowledge when we lost a few employees this year, and we need to replace that knowledge base so that the team is able to tackle the projects that they need to. And that's just there. We also have an office staff. We should be investing in them as well. Investing in our people right now is what I want my priority to be for the coming year. I want to make sure that we have performance measurements in place. I want to make sure that that identifies required training. Investing in our people, making this a place that they want to work and continue to want to work at. Losing employees is hard to replace, and we want everybody to be part of the great team.
Yes, Councilor Russell.
I guess I wouldn't disagree, but I don't think that we have to have that high of number for all employees. I think that if we had a scale that said, 5 employees in 2025 are going to achieve training, and then in 26 there would be additional 5. I don't think that you need to jump in and have, 100% training for all 15 staff. I'm not sure what that number is. I'm guessing it's 15 staff because 30,000. So I would suggest that number could be reduced.
Anyone else?
Deputy Mayor?
My question, I could have actually also asked this on a few other ones just above, I forgot to, but this is a good place to ask it. The number is 30,000 and it's shown in red or whatever color you want to call that, which is indicated to me as shared among all. But when you look at the spreadsheet, which has further detail, it becomes clear that 14,000 of this is shared among all of us. And the remainder is shared only among the 3 former villages.
In some situations, we split it out into the second line. We didn't in this one, obviously, but it is something that we can split out because yes, it would be dependent on if it's a public works employee, whether it's in the finance department, whether it's community services. So yes, it would depend on the training and the employee. But in some situations, we did split out a second line just to show that, and we did not on that one.
Yeah, because the 2 ones that are also like this above that I should have mentioned was purchasing other, remember we talked about that, and in other admin services is another one that's similar, where it's indicated as being red, which is implying to the reader it's shared among everybody, but it's only part of it is shared among everybody, and part of it. So when it's shared among the former villages, like part of it is, you mentioned the utility, but isn't that a separate budget or?
It is, and there would be a transaction that would take it out of this budget and put it into.
That's part of the utility transfer. So where it's shared among the 3, we bill the utility department for the expense.
So how do we?
So I can bill them separately to all 3.
How much of, as I said, if we use training as a development as a good example, where there's 30 requested, 14 is shared among everybody, 16 is shared among the 3 villages, former 3 villages. Of that 16, how much of that is training for the water and wastewater, and how much is?
We can't say right now. We don't know exactly what we're doing for training horses. We could guesstimate if you would like a guesstimate in it, but yeah, this isn't a work plan. This is a budget. Eventually, with the amount of money that you are approving for us, we will come back with a work plan and in January say, here's what our plan is for the year. We have to build our organization and the org chart. We have to then redo all of our job descriptions. We have to put in performance measurements for all of them with key performance indicators, and we have training in all of that. And this is all work that hasn't been done yet. So it's something that we are working on this year. As I said, people needs to be our priority in my mind for 2025. We can have some idea of what that looks like later on, maybe Q1, but it's just something that we don't have right now. So we need to identify what are the priorities for training. We want to do first health and safety ones, of course, but then what other ones are really our requirements. So we have to prioritize that before we can get an actual list to really answer the questions to the detail that you're asking.
For training, I'm okay with that. When we're going to get to other ones, I'm not sure I'm okay with that.
Cost of assessment.
We still haven't received a cost from the province yet.
And that was one, I believe, that you mentioned that was apportioned as a local cost.
Equally shared, correct.
Well, it was, yeah, the equally shared based on.
No inside outside on this one. So it's a little bit misleading here because the reds on this table imply if there's an inside outside, it would apply, but it doesn't for this one. This is one that should be a different color altogether, purple.
Yeah, we'll change that perspective.
Regional and collaborative services, CRST. So kind of, well, this is a fixed cost for one thing. And also realize that, as I mentioned, the overall cost for the Southeast Regional Service Commission, all mandated and non-mandated costs, are down 2.81%. So I think this one should not require any additional comments, but. Okay.
Can we go back to that cost of assessment?
Yep.
So every municipality or city pays it across every taxpayer type of thing.
Yes.
And then they send us a bill?
Yes. That's the answer.
That's it.
So each taxpayer pays the cost of assessment.
Yeah.
The municipality pays an additional cost of assessment. I asked that question and I was informed by the people that that's the way it works.
Yeah, okay. I thought that's what it was, but
I had a similar question, Councilor Coates. So anyway, I was answered. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
Conventions and delegations. There's an increase.
Just on that last one, I think, isn't it likely to go up? What's that?
Cost of assessment,
Yeah,
most likely, yes.
so maybe we should be like already, like for instance, 2 years ago, it was 101. So maybe we should be putting in, not in, this is like ill-advised for us. To
That's
put
why it
in-
has an aspect.
And after-
I know, but let's put in a bigger number. If we already know it went up, let's see, it was 101.
So 10%. So you want to
Yeah.
add 10% to the 25?
Yeah. I think it's wise.
Okay. Good point. Thank you. Where were we? Conventions and delegations. The amount is 15,000, which is an increase from 2024.
So again, this amount is doubled from 2024, and I do see the importance of it, but we've got to find that balance that we can send a couple people for education, send them for a course, and because this is just staffing, right?
No, this is council as well on this one.
Okay, that's
It's
everything.
attendance at UNB, AMA and B.
We've never in the past sent our water operators to anything. And I think that's something that we need to fix this year. They need to be up to date on what the current standards and practices are. And they're only going to really get that information if they're around like people.
So if you add the two together, you got training and development already for 30,000. Now we're going to have 15, so we're at 45,000, just for training and going conventions. That's a lot.
Unfortunately, none of those are offered in Fundy Albert.
No, I know, I'm not criticizing.
I know, I'm not taking it that way, but yeah,
It's a lot of money for that.
Yeah.
I think.
But investing in our people is very important.
I agree 100%.
And council as well. This is, council needs to go to these conferences. I mean, traditionally, I think they've been in Fredericton recently, or for the most part, so it means that's not too bad. So hotels, meals, maybe some considerations could be made to attending, I don't know, you drive home for the day. Is that an option? I don't know. Opening it up.
Again, for me, it's to find the balance. I do agree with Councilor Wayne. It seems like a little high. We can put it all together. And I'm all for investing in our employees. That's not my intent here, but at the end of the day, it is our taxpaying dollars. So, we have to balance what education and where people are going and what conferences are going, because at the end of the day, we still have services to maintain.
Yeah.
So
So do you have a suggestion, Councilor Overton, in terms of maybe council shouldn't go to the UMNB conference and we focus our attention on employees?
I don't think was my intent on my comment. I'm just saying between the education.
So you're suggesting we reduce it?
Somewhat, yes, but not
So
by a
say,
lot. We dropped it by 5,000.
I agree, let's take 5,000.
Okay, all right,
Thank you.
thank you.
can I add a comment? So maybe we can evaluate that, maybe the employees that attend conferences don't get training for the year, because essentially it is a type of training.
Like I said, it's all about balance for me. And
Okay.
at the end of the day, we still have services that we have to provide in our communities. So, yep, they need to be educated, we need to retain them, we need to send some to conferences, but we also need some here.
Yeah, I can make a recommendation to, for an adjustment, seeing that if it counts, like
The council is suggesting taking 5,000.
5,000.
take 5,000 off, okay.
Next item is liability insurance, which is $55,000.
Gotta have that.
We're unable to get an actual quote until our policy is up for renewal, correct?
Yeah, so that's the process we're going through now, is reviewing any of
Somewhere else.
We did.
We don't need to talk.
Yeah, there was an option on the table there that some other municipalities are entertaining the idea of different service providers. I believe there are pros and cons to that. And we can certainly have a discussion at some point. I don't think we should, I can't really do it without saying too much. So maybe if we have a closed session discussion on that one, we can take counsel.
So are you suggesting?
Regardless, we still can't get a quote from our existing provider until our policy renews, which is December.
I would suggest for budgeting purposes that you increase that amount because insurance doesn't become cheaper, it becomes more expensive. I've never seen an insurance rate stay the same or go down.
So.
I would say, on that, if we paid 52 in 2024, we should at least put 10% on that.
10%? Okay.
Councillor Elderton?
Yes, did this number include the cost of liability insurance for the White Rock? There was a request, I think, that hasn't been tabled yet. Is this included in the budget of your liability? That additional $2,000?
No, as it's not under our umbrella of our liability.
So we wouldn't be paying the insurance, we're paying them and they would pay their insurance, right? So I don't think it would sit under this line item,
No, it would sit under
which we have.
parks and playgrounds.
Does it include?
Same idea. Well, we haven't resolved that one yet, so no, that will not sit in there.
So that one's still an open and
Municipal liability.
This is just the municipal.
they were under ours for this year, actually.
There was no additional cost to our insurance per se. It was just, they were included under the umbrella, and if you were to put a dollar amount to it, it would have been the $1,000 that they were quoted. But it's not that our insurance would go down by $1,000 if they weren't included under it anymore.
I get that.
Councillor Russell?
Have we checked to see what other municipalities, like what insurance company they're using, or maybe some of their costs that they are receiving? Because I don't know if that is high or low. So I'd be interested to see what other municipalities within our same size and the jurisdiction would be paying, and maybe who they're dealing with. Because if our term is up in December, you said, I think this should be a priority that we look to see. Again, get the number of quotes to see if we are getting the rate that is good.
It is a larger conversation that's been going around in all the municipality, like the circles, but yes, we can certainly come back with some more information.
Hey, municipal association memberships. It's budgeted at 10,000 last year, projected 83.93, suggesting 10,000 again for 2025. Deputy Mayor?
I just have a question, because I did not attend UMNG. I know last year, wasn't there a big kerfuffle about how the annual memberships were being allocated across the different municipalities? Wasn't there sort of a bit of an uproar, and weren't they agreeing or promising to revisit the formula?
Yes, by establishment of a committee. That committee, I believe, is being formed, but there is no anticipated change in 2022.
Perfect. Okay, that's my question. Thank you. But there's something happening maybe in the future.
For the future, maybe going into 2026. Any other questions as far as municipal association memberships? And that includes, I believe that's the AMA and B as well as UMNB and
NFCM.
FCM. And it's important to be part of those. Community grants, the budget last year was 44,200. Projected use is 35,796 and is proposed at 35,000, which is a reduction from last year.
I think this one's difficult too, because I think it's that the committee, the whole, where it's coming up for discussion tonight for our grant process for 2025, is it not?
Correct.
So how do we tie in a discussion that hasn't been had yet into a budget that we're trying to determine what to allow for?
Well, first of all, at our committee of the whole, we're not going to make a decision,
Right.
But we will have to make a decision based on what's allocated in the 2025 budget at some point.
So,
Yes. Oh, sorry.
don't, you might answer my question.
So, so community grants is a bit of a topic on its own. So when I first came on board, there was grants being allocated with no rhyme or reason. It seemed council had asked for some sort of a policy that we could then rate these applications off of and award the grants. And there was a certain pool of money that was already there when I had started that. There was this $44,000. So how are we going to dole out this $44,000? So we created the policy. We realize now that looking at it, that can be tweaked. We think we'd like to take some time and look at the policy again, maybe categorize it a little bit differently. One of the things was the multi-year grants, which is what we're looking at this year. It was the idea of the multiple year grants is those that are asking for every year. And let's just say, okay, for the next 3 years, you want X amount of money. Are we going to approve this or not? It would help us with budgeting so that we know what to expect. It was supposed to be applications closing in September, which they did, give us time to get a report together, and then we would have the information to be able to discuss it in the budget deliberations. So the timing of that clearly isn't working because now the November is, now we're talking about the budget, we haven't really cleared that up. So for one, we'd like to definitely change that. But for two, the grants that were awarded in 2024 followed the policy. So I know that council is a bit curious on why there's so many and what they're being awarded. Like every one of them came to council, we presented the information and they were approved at the council level. Having said that, they seem to be more and more grants being requested every year. I mean, since we've created that report, I think we've got 2 more that have come in. And a lot of them are short notice. They put an application in for a grant or a request and then they expect to have that turn around within a couple of weeks. But the reality is it has to get to the next committee of the whole and then to the next council meeting after that in order for the approval to go through in the way that the policy is recommending and the way it should really if they're asking for any great amount of money. So we would like the opportunity to re-look at that policy and create a better checklist or create different categories. Is this for sports recreation? Is it for youth? Is it for economic development or tourism? So where do we need to be putting this money? And then linking that kind of to the strategic plan that says, okay, well, these are the things that we were putting a priority on in our strategic plan. So yes, those are the types of things that we want to go through with. The in-kind requests are fast and furious as well. I know that the report said there was 8. I'm surprised it was that low. I thought a lot of requests that come in. It could be that a few of them we have turned down because it's just not within the scope of Public Works to be able to do the in-kind requests that they're asking for. So we've based the number in here on what we've received for the grants under the multiple use policy. And then thinking that maybe we need to be dropping that dollar amount down, that having $44,000 that we give to the public is too high. So let's drop that number down a little bit and see if we can work within that context. I think we should maybe look at who is able to get funding elsewhere that are coming to the municipality when we could be a second or third source of revenue for them. Those are kind of the suggestions that we're knocking around the table right now. To make it really, does somebody need $250 to do, a project with kids in the park in Riverside-Albert? Well, then maybe that's something that we would like to support because they wouldn't get funding anywhere else. And if it wasn't for the municipality, then maybe the project wouldn't go forward. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Kind of the $38,000, or sorry, yeah, the 33.2 was really just based on the applications that we've received to date. And we could kind of work our plan around that and change the policy knowing that that's the money that was sitting there. So that's kind of my work on that one.
So the recommendation is to reduce it to 35 from 44.2. Is there? Yes, Councilor Order.
Just a few things on that. Appreciate that you are thinking about doing a study. I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't be paying for something until that study is complete. It's just a guessing game at that point. So I mean, I would like to see this either held off or majorly reduced before that study is complete. Just on a side note, I did look up Grand Lake Westfield. Grand Bay, Westfield, and their max is $2 a person. So it's much lower, and I believe their population is roughly about ours, so $12,000. Salisbury's is a max of $14,000. So, you know, compare Fundy Albert to Salisbury or Westfield, Grand Bay Westfield, it's we're over double what they are. I also think that there should be a max amount that somebody can ask for. Right now, it's whatever they ask, they get. And, you know, I've never wrote a proposal and received, I mean, our community director, you know, you don't write a proposal, the number that you write for is not the number that you receive. So there should be some compromise with respect to Fundy Albert, and those numbers should be negotiated. So I would think this needs a lot of work, and until that work can be defined, I would like to see that number, you know, cut in half again.
So valid points on those. In some of those municipalities, though, they may have funding elsewhere for different things. So let's say they could have a youth program and they would have funding in the youth program that people could get grants at. So it's hard to say. Ours seems to be a catch-all for a lot of things, and I think that's what's making it complicated for us. And we really need to kind of figure out exactly. So I don't disagree with those comments.
Any other thoughts on grants and contributions? Deputy Mayor?
I think we should just somehow flag this one in our, because when we get to the bottom of either today or sometime on Saturday, where we actually see what the bottom line is, and if we don't really completely like it, we need to go back to look for areas to trim. This would be a prime one to go revisit, I think.
Okay. Councilor Elderton?
No, that was my comment as well. And in addition, I did, like I said, it's a bit confusing because we're talking about it now, but we're going to discuss it at the committee of the whole, because there was one, I do recognize that minor hockey and Fundy Blades have had a subsidy for many, many years and they depend on it. There was a huge jump, I believe, in the ask for Fundy Blades. Those I consider a benefit to all of Fundy Albert, whereas some of the grants are very local and, you know, may not benefit all of Fundy Albert sometimes. So anyway, I think I agree with Councilor Era. We'll flag it for now and move on.
I agree with the Deputy Mayor. I guess in order for me to see that, I do need to see it being cut right now, and that so that I can see both scenarios. So I would like to see scenario A, that it is reduced, and then scenario B, where it stays at 35,000.
That might be a little bit complex. That means that we have to produce two sets.
Or just, I mean, it's hard to see the bottom line, Deputy Mayor, when you don't see it being cut. So in order to see that cut, you need to see it on paper.
Yeah, I'm okay with a number, because I think we're going to probably have to revisit a number of numbers. So certainly no more than 35 if you want to put it to 20 or.
So we have the 35 number, so let's see it at 20 and see what happens.
Anyone else have any comments? Councilor Lane, Councilor Coates, Councilor Jonah?
Biggest takeaway I like about this conversation is put this on a max on it. It's not a free for all, that's not, that's what they look at. For sure.
I agree also, the max is good, and I take 10, I wouldn't take 50. I'd go to 25. We already set a standard and we need to just revisit this and go and do it and take a good look at it. And like the CAO said, see who actually does qualify these things and set a standard of what qualifies and who streamline it a little bit, that's all.
I'm with that.
Okay, so am I, because I believe that Salisbury also has part of their grants and contributions program. They have a policy, and their policy allows for grants multi-year grants that are in excess of $250, like we do in ours. And I don't know that if theirs is, if they allow grants and contributions to, I think you mentioned, Councillor Lord Russell, that it's like $12,000.
It's 14,000.
14, that would be the only source of grants and contributions, and they have some other projects.
You know, that could be something that we can supply the residents as well as a list of where the other programs might apply that they can actually apply to.
Right.
That would be easy to do, I would think, so.
Okay, so the suggestion is to reduce it to 25.
Up to 25. That was my point. Thank you.
Protective Services, RCMP, that is the source of probably one of the biggest increases, 200, almost 200, more than 280,000, which is significant. I do have one question, though. First of all, we don't know that that is going to be what we are going to be billed, so we need to be very cautious in this approach. Secondly is, if it does increase, we need to be mindful that we operate on a calendar year budget. The police, the RCMP, and the province operate, well, the province operates, I think, on a fiscal basis, which is to March 31st. And I do know, having been involved in billings for RCMP, is that the first bill, the last quarter bill for the RCMP will be at this current rate, which means the first bill that we pay at the end of March will be at the current rate today, not the new rate. So it would be 3/4 at the new rate, 1/4 at the old rate. So there could be some savings there, but it's quite premature to start saying that we should reduce that or we should increase it, because we really don't know what that amount's going to be. Those are some of the challenges that we have, and administration is trying to do their best to get that. Yes, Councilor Lord Russell.
Under the RCMP, I understand that that's a fixed cost, but there's two things here that I've wrote down, is that there should be a letter written to the province to let them know that, you know, if small municipalities like ourselves cannot continue to afford, you know, 19.6, 19.2% increase. So first of all, there should be a letter sent from council, you know, asking. It just, we're not the only one out there. Maybe it's UMB that it can do it for us, but I do think that we should put that on the top of our radar, as well as, you know, I understand that they're looking for a 19% increase, but what other services are they providing to Fundy Albert for that 19%?
Police.
I understand that, but are we getting, like, what, we don't know, we've never met with the RCMP. We don't know what they, you know, how many times they're coming to our area. I mean, there should be a formula that's out there that states that they will be doing so many drive-bys or drive-ins, whatever they're called. So yeah, I think that we need to schedule a meeting with them and to make it known that we are looking at this number and we are taking it seriously.
Thank you. All right. Oh, yes,
This one is to be clear that in the spreadsheet, this is under the shared service, which means if we do make a decision to go to inside outside, that would play to this. Which correct? Well, and I believe this is fundamentally an equally shared service. It has been in the past, right? Remember, you even mentioned it yourself, Mayor, that the last several years, the bills came in assigned per subunit.
The estimate, I think, that the province provided us.
Well, certainly in the budgets,
Yes.
it's an assignment per subunit. I believe it's based on the concept of equally shared. There's no inside outside rate. So this one, in my view, needs to be like cost of assessment. You know, if we're going to put it per pole, this is one of them.
All right. Under fire, for firefighting force personnel, the budget of 60,000 is proposed at the same amount as last year. Any comments?
I think this line item was all debated last year. I think we came to a general understanding. It's now the same for all fire departments. Am I wrong in saying that?
I wasn't here last year. I can't speak to that.
The treatment of the fire personnel is the same price.
Principally, yes.
Yes. Okay. Firefighting force other. There's a reduction being proposed.
there were some services, that they had requested last year that they didn't use. So I cut them because a lot of, there's other lines in their departments that are increasing, so there need to be some give and take.
Yes.
Explain what you know, what are we paying for that?
Riverside-Albert, so that would be WorkSafe, New Brunswick, their insurance with Andrew McDonald, and I think conventions.
Thank you.
Next one is fire alarm systems. A significant increase from 74,786 in 2024 to 165,775. And I believe in your presentation, you mentioned that part of that was the purchase of TMR radios.
Big part of it.
Big part of TMR radios is that, does that include regional fire dispatch?
Yes.
Yes. No, Councilor Ward Russell.
I believe at one of the last meetings, we did talk about the TMR radios, and it was asked if Cover had already paid for that service. And I had reached out to the town of and we've already paid that service in 22 and 23.
Right. But it's still a shared service.
Yep, I just wanted, it was told that we had not paid it. I just want to make it clear that we had already paid it, contributed to it in 22 and 23 in the budget.
I believe my comment was that we should not be paying it because it was already included in Riverview's costs. And so in my correspondence with the province, who are, actually it's the Kodiak PSAP, that I had asked them not to include that in the cost to be paid for regional dispatch for us. And I believe they came back with a quote of $22,400 and some odd dollars for regional fire dispatch. That the purchase of the TMR radios, Riverview Fire already used TMR radios, it's purchased. We're actually paying for that in the invoice from Riverview Fire. So for Fundy Albert, those radios would be part of that increase. And it is an important element of fire to bring them into the 21st century, because the radios that they're currently being used now are operating on a system that's being phased in. And we have been told by the province through the Public Safety Committee that in time, if we don't get on TMR, we're going to be forced to get on TMR. Any other comments? Yes, yes, Councillor Elderton.
So the $90,000 increase, just to be clear, is for the TMR radios. And what else? Because-
Regional fire dispatch, which is around 22,400.
So the TMR radios will help all three fire departments?
Yes, it's for all three. Deputy Mayor?
The question I have is I thought what happened last year is that we budgeted to buy half of them.
Correct.
But I didn't think we bought them. We did. So why did we spend almost all that money?
Because that will include my recommendation that will be shared at committee.
Transfer.
That's in the capital too.
Okay, so 74 was to include some stuff that we normally were buying, because for instance, the year before we had 31,000 in there without any TMRs.
Yeah, that's like our tower and our, the Bell radio thing that is used.
Yeah, it just seems like if we already basically funded half of those TMRs last year, and I realize there's also regional dispatch, but it's still, it doesn't, the numbers don't really add up to me. It just seems odd.
The cost of the TMR radio estimate is increased to amount of what was last year.
It increased again. And they're almost $3,600 a radio. Now, on the plus side, there's no radio licensing fees that are associated with TMR. That's included in the system, and there's no tower maintenance or anything to do with that. That's all inclusive.
So just for fun, just to project into 2026 for a sec, on this line item in particular, would we see this probably drop way back down to,
If we're able to buy all the radios. But
We'll buy all the
but in
radios and then
time-
disconnect VHF altogether.
in time,
Yeah.
we need to be mindful that those radios don't last forever. So there needs to be a replacement program of some sort over a period of time.
right, okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
He asked the question I was gonna ask, so that this was a one-time fixed.
It is a big increase for a specific purpose, and it benefits all the Fundy Albert.
Just a quick question.
Yes, Councilor Jones,
You had mentioned that it's $22,000 for dispatch with TNR.
I think it's.
What would the president pay without everything, so? That'll be a new fixed cost every year.
I think there's enough
Yes.
cost currently for the.
Fuel, there's the radio,
It's done.
there's a radio tower, there's a radio service.
So we'll have to for sure put in as
The 24,000, the $22,000 will be a recurring
a
fee.
current fee, so that number is going to go back down to where it was previous year, where it's always going to be higher.
They'll at least be in.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Ward Russell.
Do we need to purchase all of the radios all up front, or is it something that we can do in stages?
The recommendation is for everyone to go, this is coming from NV 911, is that we do it fully. There is a way to purchase part of the radios and for them to operate with the use of what's called a black box. So the people, they're currently have black boxes, but I don't know whether they're using them or not. And it allows the TMR radios to communicate with those who are on VHF, but not the other way around. Ideally, you want the firefighters to be able to all talk to one another. So the idea is to purchase all the radios for all the firefighters so that they can all communicate, and eliminates the need for the black box.
And it also takes away, with the new TMR radios, it takes away liability of our firefighters, because with the VHF radio, it's not reported.
That's right. Plus, currently, our firefighters, we're relying on volunteer firefighters who are taking the calls. There's no built-in redundancies. There's no built-in information tracking on when the call comes in, who they dispatch, who's on scene, when they get on scene, and so on. Whereas with the regional fire dispatch, all that information would be captured by the operational communication center, and it provides a level of protection for the municipality as it relates to any potential civil liability.
I'm quite,
Yes, Councilor Bowles.
last year, didn't we put 50,000 in EMO? Or is that in that fire alarm system and the 74,786? Where did that 50,000 go?
As was mentioned, the proposal is to take 50,000, transfer it to a capital account to spend it next year.
Okay. Okay. So we didn't spend anything.
It hasn't been spent on anything else. Yes, Councilor Ward
So
Russell.
if you're transferring $50,000, do you still need that large increase?
Yes.
So it's
It's more than 50,000.
$285,000.
Well, it also, it's not just the radios, it includes the dispatch service, plus it still has the VHF radios until the transition. So there's a cost for their tower and their cost for their bell service.
So I guess what,
Every volunteer would need a radio as well, and I don't believe that currently they all carry a radio. So this is now that every one of them, so there are TMR radios existing in the 3 stations already, but only a few of it. And that black box is then how they use, so they have been doing it kind of ad hoc for the past few years. Now it's really just time to finish this and have a full transition.
no, so we're basically taking the budget amount that we had last year, adding the budget amount for 2025 and getting this transition done as opposed to in stages. Yeah.
All right. Anything else on firefighting systems or fire alarm systems? If not, water costs, I believe our costs are apportioned from the utility budget to each fire department. Is that correct?
It's just to the fire departments that use the water systems.
But it's a cost that's transferred from utilities to
It's
departments.
from general operating expense and it's a revenue on utilities.
Any questions there? Station and building. The budget is that there's just a small increase from 51,006 to 54,792. I assume that's for the operating of the buildings.
Yes.
And again, this is an area where we should be probably putting money into reserve, because as we phase out of the trucks that we have and have to purchase new trucks, some of them aren't going to fit in our buildings anymore. Our stations are going to become too small for the type of trucks that are now on the market. So this isn't squirreling money away at all. This is just status quo. So this year we want to spend some time with the fire departments and focus on needs analysis, what kind of, a 5-year plan, 10-year plan for equipment, full inventory of what they have currently, all of that. So we can make some better decisions next year and maybe start looking at some long-term plans for the fire department.
Any questions in regard to station and buildings?
No, sorry.
None? Yes, Councillor.
Can I just go back one step here? There, you had a list of recommendations for the increase. That's included in that extra 900 or 97,000, or is that part of the next one, which is funding equipment? It might be part of the next one. Sorry.
It's 2.4.3.4 actually.
Sorry.
Firefighting equipment, which is the bunker gear
This
and
list.
the CBA equipment.
That'd be the list I named earlier.
Yeah.
And there was a discussion with the chiefs and deputies, is that I understand that these equipment need to be replaced because they expired, but we also need to work on a better asset management plan and putting reserves away, because we obviously, these pieces of equipment come with the expiry and we should be better prepared for it.
And I think if you look at the list of equipment that is in the recommended column, it is equipment that is expiring and equipment that's absolutely necessary by our volunteer force. Fire investigation. It's an amount of $2,000 versus 2,500. Zero was used in 2024. So is there a reason for that 2,000? What would that be?
I've never had to use it in the past, but I do believe it must be there for a reason for investigations.
Well, yeah, I would say if there was ever a situation where we needed to, that would be, I'm going to have to look up the exact explanation of what falls under that, but I'm assuming there hasn't been any situations where we've had to investigate any wrongdoing, let's say, or, but we can come back with exactly what that would be.
If that's an arson investigation.
Well, I'm just wondering if it is an arson or if it's on our behalf, if it's something that happens to one of our municipal buildings. That's what I'm just not sure. So we'll take a peek.
Fire prevention, an increase from the budget of $2,500 in 2024 to $3,000 in 2025.
What's that include? The open houses that they.
Yes, that would include open houses and, I know down here, I'm not sure about the Riverview Fire Department, but our fire departments go to the school and do a presentation with kids. And- yeah.
Okay.
Fire prevention week.
Any other questions, comments? Training and development, budget of $12,553. There was $9,732 spent, and they're proposing an increase to $15,000. Comments? Questions? I think we would be well advised to make sure our firefighting force is well trained. Contractual agreement with other departments, that's the Riverview fire costs. So the Riverview fire costs are increasing from $316,614 to $382,249. I believe that a spreadsheet that outlines those costs was provided to all members of council, so that is already a fixed cost for 2025. Yes, Councilor Russell.
Yeah, I do have a comment on that. I do see the increase. It's a large increase. I believe that I've had conversations with the town review, and this is just, So spreadsheet is what they ask. Doesn't mean that we have to agree with. So there is conversation that can be held that, listen, we're a small municipality. We can't have what percentage that is, an increase of $65,000 increase,
20%.
20%. So I think conversations can be had of, is there any movement? We don't have a say in what that budget is. It's just given to us.
Yeah.
So we should have a say, and the say is we can't afford $382,000. So what can you do for us?
You can reduce the amount of area we cover.
I think conversation needs to be held.
I think there could be an argument for water costs, because I know from recent fires that have been reported, they're actually having water trucked in by Salisbury Fire Department as well as Hillsborough. So maybe we should be attributing to the water costs if the water cost is coming from other fire departments.
Yes, Councillor Young.
But I think what Councillor Heather Russell was saying is, it's great that we can go back and say this and this, but just have a conversation. Maybe just go back to them and say, like, we just can't afford 20%. Let's just come to some kind of understanding and see if we can get them to come down to 15%. At least that's a start. But it sounds like it's just a conversation. So
It's all that needs to be done, and it has happened in the past. And not with this municipality, but with other municipalities that use contracted services. So, yeah, I think that we should be at the table when they negotiate a $4.7 million budget, and let them realize that we don't have the finances to do.
Yes.
But in section, when they say service, right, the town of Riverview is at 100%. So is the assumption not that those costs are proportional to the population, like the area that they're serving, right? So they've made their full, but are you saying that once their budget gets approved, that this budget could be different once Riverview finalizes their budget deliberations, in which case then our percentage of what it is could change?
I believe.
If they're saying that Fundy Albert, like Hillsborough was 1.17, if we add those up, I'm assuming that that's a portion of whatever the budget total
That's their
budget
total budget. That's how it's.
So although this is an ask, it's an ask before their council. And should their council make a change in that 4.9, then we would see some cost savings depending, or more, depending on how they.
Well, I don't know, but I would think that the town of Riverview would have their budget approved by now.
I'll reach it. I'll get a picture for Saturday for sure.
Thank
And
you.
to see their assessment is even reduced for us from a 210 to 208. So I mean, that's interesting as well.
I'll get some clarification on that.
Other EMO services. Oh, sorry,
Just had a comment, just for reality check for all of us. I ran the number here that fire in general has, since our first budget of 2023, has gone up 54%. But we all know our fire protection service is wonderful and deserves all support they can get, but it's wicked. 54% in 2 years.
That's a lot.
And there were a number of factors.
Yeah, we had a truck to show for it. And,
Well, the truck's not even in that portion. The truck's not even in that
oh
portion.
yeah, they're not even in there, that's right.
Moving on, other EMO services, the recommendation is from 25,000 to 26,913. I believe our treasurer outlined what those EMO services would entail. Questions?
We didn't spend, I just looking back and forth here, we didn't spend the amount last year. So does it warrant a slight increase for this year?
I think it's this last year, like, we didn't provide an emo plan or emo honorarium. So that was giving room for that.
And do we suspect we'll be going down that route for 2025?
We are looking at writing that job, no, I should have had it done by now, but writing the job description for the EMO volunteer, but it would be an honorarium, I believe. It's a discussion at the EMO committee that we would have an individual in that position, and it would be an honorarium possibly. So I think there's money set aside for that.
Any other comments? Yes, Councilor Russell.
Could we get a breakdown exactly what is being proposed for the 25,000? 25,000?
Yep.
6,000?
Thank you. Violent enforcement other. So the cost for violent enforcement were estimated at 55,000 this year. The projected costs are 44,448, which I understand is a result of it only being implemented at a certain point in 2024, not for the entire year, and the projected increase of 56,419. Yes.
The actual recommendation from the administration would be to have a full-time bylaw officer 5 days a week at a cost of $115,000. We have a lot of bylaws that should be enforced that aren't being enforced. For example, parking problems in both Hillsborough and Alma, boondocking, even building permits. Right now, it's just for unsightly, and we've seen some success with that, I believe. We have seen success in that, and 2 days a week is, barely enough to cover that. Having a bit of a presence of a bylaw officer in the community goes a long way as well. We certainly can see a need for the full-time 5 days a week, and we certainly would be able to dictate what those hours would be, meaning we could stagger them to have some evenings and weekends, depending on what the need would be. But for the sake of the budget, we did leave it at 2 days a week. There are a few other irons in the fire with the Southeast Regional Service Commission and some shared regional initiatives, and this sits as possibly one of them, but there's no guarantee with that right now. But with enforcing bylaw, we can write bylaws all we want, but if we're not able to enforce them, then they have very little value.
What I would add to that is that amount would not include any cleanups of any potential actions that council authorizes. If one was recently authorized, there's no money assigned to that. So that would have to be taken from elsewhere in the budget. So if there's a cleanup of a property, that's not included in that amount. So just be aware that if that amount stays or is reduced, that there are no provisions for any cleanups of any property.
Normally that's backfilled to the.
So that's
A year or two later.
Yeah, it's, so kind of,
So 115 would be full-time.
5 days a week.
What does it look like we hire somebody to do
It's
that for us?
impossible to do. There's a lot of overhead costs. So even just with their uniform alone, radio communication, you can't just have one person, a vehicle. There's a lot of, I think that was explored at one point with Fundy Albert as well. But it's very, very costly, and you can't just have them one. You need to have some sort of a backup that when that person is going out to do whatever work they need to be doing, that they have somebody on a radio knowing where they are.
Any other comments? Yes, Councilor Russell.
I want to combine bylaw and animal control, I guess. I'm just curious, for 56,000 for bylaw and give or take $20,000 for animal. Is there any, do we have to have animal control? Can we not, increase the 56,000 by 20,000 and ask them to look after the animal control? I just find that, $20,000 is an awful lot for one specific where, you're getting a little bit more bang for your buck out of the bylaw officer. So if you increased the bylaw and gave them an extra $20,000 and asked them to look after the dogs, I think you'd probably be in a better situation.
So legally we're required.
Guess is that would be next to impossible because the bylaw enforcement officers are not equipped to grab dogs and bring them to the pound. They require special equipment, cages in their vehicles and so on. So I seriously doubt that would be.
I bet they'd be interested in making some more money, so I'm thinking that they might be.
Well, we did approach them with that last year, and although they can assist for that very reason, they can assist if it's if there's a dog owner, let's say, that is less than cooperative, they can be there to assist the animal control people, but they're not able to collect and chase after animals and to that degree.
Then they also got to house those animals until
They can get them to.
decisions are made with them.
Councilor Jonah?
In regards to animal control services, do we have any idea how much they had to interact with the public this year?
Very little. So we do include those stats on the committee of the whole report. There hasn't been one in a couple of meetings, a few meetings, because I've been struggling to get some listed on information, but I'll hope to put that in the December report, but it hasn't been, there's not been very many, to be very honest, but it's something that we have to have. It's a legal requirement. We can't not have animal control for dogs specifically.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes. I apologize, I'd like to just go back to the bylaw enforcement for a moment. It's just about, not the amount, it's about how it's attributed. So it's shown as a shared. What's interesting is last year it wasn't exactly that way. What a portion was shared among all. And then the other portion, the much larger portion, was shared only among 3 villages. So that's been a change here.
Correct. So previously, the 3 villages had one contract, and then the province had one in place for that local service districts, and that has since expired, and I believe it's in January.
You're talking dogs, he's talking.
Oh, sorry, you're talking the bylaw.
Yeah.
I don't recall why the,
I kind of had the same, it's the same question for both bylaw and then that last year, they were shared in a different way than you're planning for this year.
Part of it was the result of us not having a consolidated
Yeah.
bylaw enforcement, and now we do. So part of that was a result of that, because the previous 3 municipalities had bylaw enforcement, and we had to take that over from the province. And so until we did that, the majority of the costs went.
Because now that they are shared totally. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Does anyone have an issue with animal control services being kept at the recommended level of 18,126?
I don't think we are, I mean, until I see a report and I listen, I know it's important, you gotta have it, it says that you have to have it, but it doesn't say that you have to spend $18,000 to do it. So even though they might quote you, again, you just don't give what they want. I mean, we
We
can't
have 2
afford it.
votes.
So we
no,
can
we haven't
afford it.
got the second
We haven't
one
got the
yet.
second one. We're waiting.
So like you go back to them and say, listen, we've only got $10,000. What can you offer us for $10,000? There's gotta be some back and forth there instead of just, okay.
If I may, that 18,126, that is one quote.
Yes.
Okay.
That is conjoining our services. Like in previous years, we had, the LSDs still have their contract with NBS, VCA, and the former municipalities had cost. So this is with the whole municipality under NBS, VCA.
I'm just curious, clarifying that, so it wasn't something that administration made up or whatever it is, it was that quote that that's the one.
So just to be clear, I think it's down from 2020.
Yes.
By quite a bit.
Right. So we've gone from 24,000 to 18,000. So we are going in the right direction.
Regional public safety, again, that's all part of 2.81% reduction in cost from the Southeast Rural Service Commission. I don't think there's any need to discuss that. Transportation services, again, common services personnel. There's an increase there. Without getting into any discussion, it's likely to do with maybe the staffing of the position and any projected increase.
Is that one that transfers to me?
Yes, or a portion of that is paid 100% by utility. But can we discuss in camera with the others?
Right. Maybe we can jump to the other, which would be what's common services other. Is that personnel related?
Yeah, that would be,
Okay. Well, we can have that conversation another time. Workshops, yes.
Because now we're getting into some big money, right?
Yeah.
And lots of stuff in here. First off, I guess, I'm looking at the spreadsheet, the budget spreadsheet that you provided. This goes back to my question about which tax-based numbers were we using? The one on tab 1 or the calculator tab? Because the attribution is not a big difference, but I think there's some the numbers I'm seeing here in the spreadsheet appear not to be using the tab 1 tax base. That's my first comment.
Just, sorry, specifically, are we talking about the,
The attribution for any of these numbers, but we can start first with the 269,045 number. The attribution among the 3 municipalities doesn't seem to be right. That's first question. Second, like who are these people? Or I don't necessarily mean their names, but this is public works people. Is that who is this?
under this particular holiday, it's public works, correct?
Yes, but it also includes a contractor.
Yeah, so water operator and public works.
Okay, so that includes the operator in charge
Correct.
for next year, which
Is a
But it wouldn't, this is only some of the personnel, right? This is, because it's only 269. This is,
So I think that's why maybe this is a better conversation in a closed session, because there's a lot of line items for salary dollars.
okay.
It's broken out into different sections, so I think it might be easier to look at it with the spreadsheet that we had sent to council yesterday, I think, or Sunday, with all of the employees and what positions they're in, and maybe that would be an easier place to have the conversation, because it is spread out for different lines.
Okay, but without getting, because I'm not trying to dig into individual salaries for individual employees. But this is now, the comment I have is linked to the one about the clerk we saw earlier, that the clerk had been funded in 2024 and is still not staffed yet, right? I believe that there was a superintendent of public works funded. Is that probably buried in here? So the same question I had for what happened to the clerk 2024 money. I want to know what happened to the superintendent 2024 money. First thing, and the second thing is, are we intending in 2025 to staff the superintendent? Presumably, that's what we're seeing here.
So Director of Operations and myself, well, all of us are working on an organization chart, and we will be analyzing the positions. The supervisor is definitely one of them. He's only been in his role for 2 months. He needed to see a little bit of what's going on in order to figure out how to do things most effectively. So it is on the books for sure.
Right, so this is actually where I have a bit of a fundamental disconnect with how we're doing this budgeting process. Is that like pre-amalgamation, like even the year before, so 2022, each of our communities performed certain services and under the Public Works water banner. And we had staff to do that. We knew what that was. And as we moved into amalgamation, the communities were expecting that those services would remain at roughly the same level or better, because even from a minute ago, even from 2023, the first year of amalgamation, we were already having more staff than the year before. So the expectation was more work was going to be done. And presumably the number of staff you have is linked to the work you're trying to do. But we're unable to show to the community right now, A, what they can expect to receive in terms of services, and or B, how many people is it going to take to do the services that we're telling or giving the expectation of the community to be done. We seem to be just having monies. We don't have a work plan. We don't have the level of service yet. It seems all backwards.
So in all fairness, we do have a lot of new staff that we're trying to figure all this out, right? So change doesn't happen overnight for us. We inherited all of this when we got here, and we're doing our best to kind of clean it up and doing what's best for Fundy Albert. And that doesn't mean making hasty decisions. So for the example of the clerk, I didn't hire a clerk right away because I really think that that role could be something different. Can it be mixed with something else? Does it need to be its own thing? What's the most cost-effective thing that we can do? So things like that just take us a little bit of time to analyze. In the meantime, we've lost some employees, we brought new ones on. The work plan, spending time doing a work plan, if we would have done a work plan on this budget, knowing full well that we're probably cutting $1 million out of it, that would have been a wasted exercise. That would have been a lot of person hours on our side. That would have been for nothing because we know that this budget isn't going to stand as it is. So we need to be able to give you a work plan based on the amount of money that we have. And that work plan will then say, what do we need for resources? What do we need for equipment? What do we need for, so we can't put the cart before the horse. And I know it's difficult to make decisions on a budget, but you have to understand what was spent last year. Can we maybe, okay, well, this is what we're probably going to factor into it. And then this is what it's going to look like. If you tell us that you want to cut the budget by half, then we've got to go back and figure out how we're going to do everything we need to do by half and give you what the repercussions of those decisions are, because things will have to be cut, right? So,
And if there's a position of a public works superintendent that was planned and it's still not staffed, and you decide, let's cut that out, then there's no opportunity for an additional position to take on some of that work. So that changes the water completely in the soup that they have to kind of mix. So the suggestion is that is what they need for 2025. And the goal, I think, is they've said that they're going to look at the organizational chart, try to build the organization around that, to improve services overall in the community. But ultimately, it's council's decision whether they want to approve that amount or not.
Yeah, but in my view, it starts from the work you're trying to do.
if we
And
had,
then you build it from there.
I don't disagree. If there was already 5-10-year work plans in place that we were just tweaking and building off of, then that would be for sure. We could say, well, this is what we had identified last year. We said this was going to be our 10-year plan. And are we still on line with that 10-year plan? But we're not at the starting point. The administration doesn't have a 5-year or 10-year plan. We weren't given anything that said this is what we had decided before you got here. We're trying to create that. So next year, we anticipate that this budgeting would be a lot different, because we'll say, this is what we had last year. This is what we did with it. Here's the plan moving forward. We know we have these projects ahead of us. We know we're going to have to increase our, money for infrastructure or for buildings or whatever. So giving us a little bit of time to get those plans together will make the budgeting process much easier next year, because you will have what you're looking for. We just didn't get that when we started.
Well, if you allow me, Mayor, this link leads into another discussion that maybe we don't need to have now because it's too big. But some of the councillors spoke offline just at the break, linking to a comment that our Director of Operations made, and it has to do with the concept of which work are we doing and which work, we meaning our staff and our equipment, and which work are we choosing to hire somebody else to do. And this is a fundamental, decision that needs to be made on all of our major services. And Ian, as a director there, he was talking about I think the view of administration is perhaps to be moving towards more work being done by our staff who are properly trained with the right equipment to do it versus third party.
If there's a cost saving involved, or if there's not going to be a cost saving.
Yeah, these are okay. These are tricky questions. I know that we need to have full and wholesome discussions on, because it's not even just cost saving in my view. One's the ability to, who's on the hook if the product isn't up to snuff. If we get it, we're on the hook. There's no doubt about it, right? If someone else does it under a contract with specifications and requirements to meet the specifications, and the work isn't done, they're on the hook. But it requires us to manage a contract as opposed to manage people. These decisions, I believe, are not They are combined between administration and you don't agree?
I don't agree that council should be dictating whether administration or operations do things a certain way. We provide them what we expect out of them. We provide them the budget to do it, then it's up to them to do it in the most cost-effective and efficient way possible. We're starting to cross that line in terms of council's responsibilities, and maybe we need to remind folks of those responsibilities through some training provided to council in terms of what our responsibilities are and what the responsibilities of our administration is.
But could we not make recommendations?
You can make a recommendation, but if it flies in the face of what's being recommended by your administration, you're then dictating.
But I don't mean that. I mean before that process actually starts.
Right.
Let's take Alamo, for example. They got a bunch of additions to do, right? And to take our staff to go down there, maybe have a conversation with Ian, he's the man that's going to set it up. But maybe looking at different scenarios of how to do it, give him some ideas. Maybe he needs an idea.
Our role in that, counselor, should be to tell the CAO that ditching needs to be done in Alma. It's them that decides where it needs to be done. There's an
So we'll
element,
control the budget.
but it's not up to you as council and council members to say, you need to do this, you need to do that.
I didn't say that.
No. Well,
I said
you're suggesting
that's all.
You're suggesting that we tell them what needs to be done and how.
We'll control my budget.
We control the budget, they make the decisions based on the budget that's provided. Yes, Councilor.
Thank you. May I ask what happens to the surplus that we're not going to use on that line item? That's $80,000.
It's in the recommendations that you'll see at committee of the whole.
That it's to be transferred to.
Capital. Yeah, I'll go further detail later.
Yes, Councilor. Carter, Deputy Mayor, sorry.
Like, to me, a good example of why I believe this is a decision that is really requiring, this concept is requiring all the people that are around this table to be involved, is use snow plowing. Snow removal is a really good example. Okay. So snow removal can either be done by the municipal resources, people and machines, or it can be done by a third party or a combination of the two. And that's in fact what's done. In the budget, how this is done, if it's done by us, it comes in on line items of people and equipment. If it's done by somebody else, it comes in on a different line item, which is third party. Those decisions are not, in my view, administrative owned. Do you believe they are?
If the decision is to tender a contract,
We have to bring it to council.
they bring it
No,
to
no,
council.
no,
we
no,
approve the
that's
tender.
not what I just said though.
Right.
I'm saying the decision whether Fundy Albert plows its own snow or has someone else plow it is a decision that involves council.
So to that point, when our contracts for snow removal are up, and I believe one of them is up, both of them, two of them are up next year.
Like one for sure.
So when those are up, we will then present to council and say, our contracts are coming up. Here are our options. We can either do it ourselves, but we would have to buy equipment and train people in it. We could put a contract in place. If we do a contract, it's going to have to be tendered because it's over. Those are the recommendations because the contract that's existing is expiring. We will come to council and present options and council will make a decision.
Okay,
Then we'll go into
so
a line item somewhere and then we will spend the money in the line item as we determine and as we see fit for the circumstances.
Right, so just to recap, so that what happens there is, forget about whether something's coming due or not. We put that aside. When we're deciding, do we do it ourselves or hire it out, is ultimately a council decision.
Based on their recommendation.
Okay, well, your recommendation is all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a council decision.
If they recommend that, like, our director of operations is recommending that for the long term, it's more economically feasible and beneficial to be able to do it ourselves at a cost cost saving overall long-term than to be apportioning it to a contractor. Yes, it gets done much quicker, but at a significantly increased cost. And then at the end of the day, we have to keep paying for those costs and then maybe having to repair that damage down the road.
Yeah, but so we're agreeing with that. And so that is a group decision. It is not an administrative only decision. It's not.
It's a recommendation from the administration.
But I do believe under the policy, the procurement policy, I had the,
I'm not talking about procuring anything.
well, it has to do with contracting and purchasing. I got up to $30,000, right? That's under.
So if that is, in my view, if you've already made the decision that you're getting someone else to do it.
I think what I'm hearing from my fellow councillors is we're looking for a consult with council before those decisions are made. Not that we're dictating, but it's a consultation, a discussion about the changes before the changes are made.
Well, there's a difference between a heads up and an approval from council. And I believe Councillor or Deputy Mayor Arrow is looking for that the council gets to approve all of these things before the administration can do that.
No, that's how, conceptually how. Is it us, our staff? You see, if all of a sudden we decided we want to plow our own streets, what we need to do is we need to change the budget to add a bunch more people, right? And which we need to manage and have all that and training and all that stuff. And we need to buy a bunch of, snow plows. That's different than if we say, no, we're not doing it that way. What we're doing is we're doing it through third-party contracts. Then it's just the tendering process, which is your baby, right? You guys run it and we do. But those are fundamentally different ways to go.
So I think, if I'm wrong, we can actually, again, let's sit with snow plowing. Just say there's no contract exists. We've got two options. One, I contract it out. Two, we do it ourselves. We present to council, this is what the contract costs us over a 5-year term. This is what it will cost us to buy the machinery, train our guys, and run it over 5 years. There's your two options.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's us to decide, the council decides. Yeah, okay.
Those are big decisions. Those aren't small decisions.
Those aren't small decisions. They're not small decisions.
There is many things that we are going to have to present to you over a 5-10
Right,
year
yeah.
time frame, rather than just going, a contract this year guarantees us we get snow removal. However, it would take us 2.5 years to train our guys to then sign up for a 5-year contract. We've got to present both all the details of the 5-10 year timeline.
And clearly with snow plowing, because the contracts are coming up, right? These
Just need to be mindful of the line not to cross in having those discussions and then trying to say, well, if you take 5,000 from the budget here and you spend it over here, that is the CAO's prerogative to do that. Yes, there's a duty to inform us that they're doing that, but she is the one that's managing the budget, not us. Right? She's accountable to us for the management. Okay. Were you done in relation to the personnel or common services under transportation?
I have one question.
Yes.
So just for my brain. So if we've had no clerk and no superintendent, no expenses for that, should we not have seen a bigger budget or a bigger surplus, sorry?
It's from the second previous year.
Like, I mean, you're only showing $100,000 surplus as of right now.
It could be higher, it could be less. I still don't have financial statements, but I felt strongly enough that we'd have it around that amount.
I'm just saying that, it's, my mind is working correctly based on just those two. And there's probably many that we've gone through already today. But I mean, I would hope to see that we've not had a clerk, not a superintendent, which, I mean, I think that number is fairly high. It should be well over 100,000.
But it only takes place with what occurred in 2023. What occurs now this year for our surplus for this year only takes an effect to our next budget.
I understand whether it takes effect, but that number still needs to be seen today.
Yeah,
It takes effect, but it still needs to be seen.
It'll be shown in projections later. This is kind of it would have been beneficial to have shown projections before budget. But it will be displayed later.
I have one last question.
Yes.
Just with regards, I'm not going to want to go back up, but just to fire. When they get their budget, do they just get the total budget or do they get an line item budget?
Who?
Fire departments.
They get,
When the departments are provided their budget, I'm assuming.
yeah, we show them like what you have for
For a total, or do they,
each.
do they only know that they only have a certain amount of money in each line item? So they just don't, even though it's not on the list, they can't just purchase it. It has to be on the list.
Yeah, and then like, there's a procurement policy, so anything over whatever their threshold is, they can't just go out and say, I want this, so I think Alma Fire Department had a little bit of surplus in their equipment, so they decided to order 2 of their scuba tanks that they needed, so they only have to get 2 next year. So they sent me to the quotes required, I sent them to the CAO for approval, and then, so it's not just, they're not just spending haphazardly.
Traditionally, they do only purchase what it is that they have requested and been approved for.
And their money that they raise on their own, spend on their own accord. Like the HGH, all that kind of stuff, it's just, they do their own thing with that.
Yeah.
Which, really could go to some of the items that
Yes.
weren't approved this year. Chances are that they would take some fundraising and put it towards those.
That might get that.
Which then does a little bit come back to the municipality because sometimes it's an insured item. And so we have to tweak something in regards to, like if they bought an ATV.
So just as a point of interest, it is 2:40. We are stopping at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then we can continue our budget deliberations Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Pardon me?
We're so clear.
So there's one other key conceptual issue related that starts here, I think, with, the common services personnel. And this is a good one for our administration, is that we know that since amalgamation, we know pre-amalgamation, our public works workforce was distributed in the communities. They reported for work. The Alma people reported their day started in Alma. Riverside-Albert is the same, and Hillsborough is the same. And then from day one of amalgamation, that changed, right? And where they all report to, they begin their day here. And it was understandable, you could say, on some level, why that happened or was to be the case. But what it immediately did, and this was recognizable to us as councillors and to the public, especially down in Alma and Riverside-Albert, is we immediately became inefficient, more inefficient than we were. Because now we're just burning time and burning, gas to do the same work. And it was costing us more money. So the community, and I've been voicing it, but with the community's been asking, it might even be in the survey results buried in there, has been asking, what is Fundy Albert doing to make themselves more efficient in the world after amalgamation? I haven't seen anything in the budget proposal document that addresses this.
So this is a departure from the conversation that we're supposed to be having right now, which is about budgets. This is about service levels and the perceived lack of service levels. No, this is
the cost. It's about the cost of providing the service. The level of efficiency, which is the budget, is a measure of this. In other words, the cost to deliver the service can vary depending on your service delivery model, not the level of service, just the way you deliver the service.
And that's a conversation that our administration will need to have once we provided them the budget and come up with.
Or as part of the budget.
If you're implying about firing people, we're not asking for more resources.
Firing people. I
But
never said
we're not asking for any more resources in the budget. we will reallocate our resources depending on what the budget tells us and what the work needs to be done. We're in discussions right now on how we're going to redo the org chart. We've said that already. So how that gets distributed, we inherited what we inherited, and we're going to put a plan in place to figure out where people need to be best suited in order to save money on, like you said, on, you know, trying to get to these different locations, gas money, all of that stuff factors into it.
Or where the employees are based.
It's very hard to tell an employee that's been based somewhere that now they have to report somewhere else and not be compensated for that distance. That's a difficult thing to, they were hired under one understanding. We now have to figure out what.
Well, it's bizarre that, you know, that some of the, you know, I realize neither of you guys were here when this, but when amalgamation happened in day one, some of the employees had already the day before were reporting there. And the day after they, you know what I mean? So
It's my understanding the only employees are no longer employees of the municipality, so that
We are getting way off track here, so I am going to limit the conversation here, so we're going to move on. Under workshops, building and other personnel, I believe this would be some additional personnel for public works, if I understand correctly, or is there more there with that?
Workshop buildings, personnel, yes, it'd be the rest of the public works team.
Okay, so that's all built into the conversations that we've been having.
And will be further discussed in the third
Correct.
session.
General equipment. There's the budget of 88,195. We spent 83,760. There's a reduction down to 85, and I believe our director of operations suggested that because we have some newer equipment and the potential for some other new equipment that we may be able to reduce our costs. And again, these are shared costs between the three former municipalities and no one else, other than perhaps the rate. Yes.
well, that's because this is not.
I am going to limit you.
So can I talk about a different subject?
Yes,
Perfect.
we're going to put time limits on the conversation.
Okay, so this is blue, which means it's shared by the three villages.
Correct.
But it's performing work. But let's use grass cutting and snow plowing, because our people do some snow plowing and our people do some grass cutting, or all the grass cutting. But some of the snow plowing they're doing, for instance, they're clearing the steps for the library, right? But the library is a shared expense among everybody. And the same with the grass cutting or clearing at the rink. A lot of the facilities that are shared under recreation or culture or library use our public works employees to maintain, but they're only being paid for by the three villages. So how does that come through?
Through the treasurer, through some, I believe they're
Portion of the salary.
a portion of the salaries and a portion of other costs that are apportioned to maintenance in shared facilities, I believe.
For the arena, yeah.
And if there's the activity center in Riverside-Albert.
So public works, as an example, public works salaries are split between, right, we have that chart. Yep. So can we explain that to the council?
Yes, I can include it with our,
Because when did we see that on the
Personnel.
spreadsheet?
It would just, there'd be so many columns and colors that it would be
No,
difficult to
because-
solve.
Because we saw that we've seen in other line items that sometimes we see only the shared column, and other times we see the shared plus the three villages on the same row. Right, I've already shown you several of those earlier today, where you take a line, sometimes there's the shared and the three villages. But so why aren't we seeing the public works guys like this in that way?
because there's different lines for different items. It's so,
Well,
for the sake of time, it is a lot easier for me to demonstrate in our closed session
Okay.
on the division of each.
Okay, so we'll do that. So workshops, building, were there any other questions on general equipment? None. Workshops, building, other. Budget of $47,004. I don't know what would have been the cause of the $4. And then the proposed budget of $53,414.
I'll tell you where the $4 came from. When you're putting it in the portal, you have to tweak it to
Balance.
get it at 100%, and I think that involves like $1 here and $1 there. Would be my guess.
So is that, what type of cost would be included in there?
That would be uniforms. That would be the public works garages. I think, cell phones would be in there as well.
Okay. Any other questions there? Summer maintenance. Summer maintenance private contract.
What is that? What's it called?
Summer maintenance,
Yes.
that includes padding, patching, grading. I believe that's it.
So that would be
Yeah.
hiring a contractor to patch and pave.
Basic road maintenance beyond the normal small potholes our team's capable of doing at the moment. So any grading, large patching areas, patching service cuts, stuff like that.
So in this respect, I would comment that my comment here is that we allocated 200,000 last year, which was a reduction from the previous year. We spent 338, which I believe would include, but did that include the Pound Hill? Okay, so if that included Pound Hill, we're increasing it to 247,892. To be mindful, as was explained by our Director of Operations, that if we do that, then there will be limited to that, and we may have some other PMHP programs that we may have to rob from this area to correct. But it also includes patching and
Are no PMHP programs for this fiscal year, or this coming year?
there are
None for 2025. Bucket Hill is 2026.
Okay.
If I made the 338,000, was that complete project on Pound Hill?
No, there would be some patching, I believe, in there. I can get you a breakdown if you'd like.
Okay, because we took, we were off 135,000 from the government, correct?
Yeah.
For Pound Hill. There was money come out of reserve for Pound Hill. And the maintenance money went into Pound Hill. Correct. So we take the reserve money out of that, and 135,000 of that, we're actually higher this year than we were last year.
It's because of the PMHP.
We can provide a breakdown.
Thank you.
Summer maintenance DTI would be some of the maintenance that they perform in the communities.
One would be Hillsborough and the other would be the local roads.
Right. So that is a slight increase from last year. Sidewalks was a budget of 10,000. There was only 977 spent on sidewalks, but I believe part of the sidewalks funding was put towards the Pound Hill paving project.
Correct.
So the expenses are actually shown up above, and they're suggesting 10,000 for sidewalks in 2025.
So part of the 10 that we allocated went to Pound Hill also.
I think all of it did. Hillsborough, Riverside-Albert, and Elm's budget,
Yeah, the whole thing
the
went.
whole thing.
But I didn't know sidewalks were part of it. I thought it was just road.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So what is the 10,000? Like, this is not people, right? This is anything other than, like, for sweeping of a sidewalk, that's not here, right? This is building new sidewalks? Do we build $10,000 worth of sidewalks a year?
Well, there's probably some that we could replace and fix that are falling in disrepair, but we've decided to push the repairs onto other years by not completing anything.
We could do with a lot of sidewalk work.
Probably. We're approaching 3 o'clock, so we're going to be closing it down here shortly. Culverts and drainage ditches, the budget was 100,345, spent 119,988, and the draft budget of 89,260.
So what, this one appears, I think, came in over budget by 20,000, but we're lowering it by 10. What's that? Sorry.
For this one, we have a capital plan created, council had inserted an extra amount culvert addition for Alma last year. It wasn't used, so it'll be in my projections later, that we are projecting to put it into capital to help with the part of the monies that are put into culvert ditching to complete some of the work that needs done in Alma. I believe there's a small amount for other areas as well, as along with having Riverside-Albert's stormwater study.
So it's showing as a lower amount, but we're asking at the committee of the whole today to have money from this year put into the budget for
And
next year.
capital reserve to be spent on.
Yes.
Any questions there? Snow and ice removal, private contract. These are pretty much set amounts. I believe there's 2 private contracts.
Yes.
It's fairly straightforward. Snow and ice removal, municipal shared, which I think was what you were referring to, Deputy Mayor, which is if we remove snow and ice from a facility that is shared municipally, then that would be a shared cost. I think.
So I think those 2 lines go together. That's where we kind of split. So if you take the 253, 275 and add it to the 8696, that's the actual total budget for that line item, correct, Julia?
I believe so. So I think we have a little bit extra we put in there for Riverside-Albert because DTI does not do snow shelving. It's been a long time since we've had enough snow to snow shelve. But it's just a contingency we keep in place.
Am I wrong in suggesting that the activity center, or not the activity center, but the cultural center in Alma's done by the private contractor, and that's over and above the
Yep.
private contract?
That's included in the
That's included in that
8696.
Yes.
But it's not a shared service. That's what.
It's a shared, because it's a shared facility. It's shared by all the municipality. So in other words, the cultural center is a shared facility under the budget. So the snow removal for that shared facility is shared by all.
Which is why it's in pink and not blue.
Yeah. Does that answer your question? No?
That's okay. Go ahead.
No?
No, I'm still processing.
Okay.
Don't hold.
All right. Snow and ice removal, DTI. I believe DTI does some snow removal in some parts of the municipality. So that's 83,221, which is up slightly from 2024. The bridges, viaduct, causeway, and grade separations, there's a budget of $5,000 allocated to it. And as our Director of Operations mentioned, there is a bridge at the end of Steve Street that goes out towards the silos. That bridge it belongs to us. So I believe the suggestion is that needs to be inspected to make sure that doesn't require repairs, but that is a municipal responsibility.
Bridget, no,
Just saying.
yeah, no, it's fine.
So that's the only bridge we own.
I
That's
believe so.
right now we're right.
So but Riverside-Albert has an amount allocated for bridges. Is that because of the bridge that Hillsborough owns?
Yes, as a village shared.
Riverside-Albert has it.
Yeah.
So if you look under bridges, there's Alma, Hillsborough, and Riverside-Albert.
Oh, you're talking the
The budget.
tool.
The
budget.
tool budget.
I'm looking at this document.
Okay, so the tool budget says Riverside is going to be taxed an additional $743 for a bridge. But the bridge is owned by the municipality, but it's only shared by the 3 former villages. That's my question.
Yes, because roads are only paid by the former villages. LSCs don't pay for roads.
It's shared equally by 3 municipalities. That's what she suggested.
Okay.
Streetlights, as our treasurer mentioned, the streetlights costs have decreased from 2024, because that's not going to be part of the increase in power rates. And so there's recommending a budget of $78,331. Streetlights in Lower Coverdale is $490. Street signs is a reduction in a budget of $3,000 to $1,500 because they haven't been using it over the years. Right.
Traditionally.
Yeah. But we are responsible to replace street signs. And regional transportation, Southeast Regional Service Commission, again, that's a bit of a decrease, but in overall, the decrease of 2.81%. And that might be a good place to stop and resume our conversations at Environmental Health Services when we start on Saturday morning. We do have 2 minutes. I know Mr. Knickle is here. And if you can keep your comments relatively short, Mr. Knickle, I don't know if you want to have anything to say, because we did have in our agenda the opportunity for the public to speak if they wish.
You didn't tell me I had 2 minutes.
You were, well, there was an agenda. The agenda had public comments and statements. That's all right.
It's okay, Don.
No, I didn't know. I do appreciate that. Although I didn't, my father, like I said earlier, my father told me it was the right thing to do to come here and listen to this so that I could educate myself, and I think it was the right thing to do. I've heard a lot of good things, especially towards the public works side, where you've had a lot of transition here over coming into one. I'm just hoping that, through this process and seeing what you guys are doing, is that, at the end of the day, it's going to come up with a number, and you just got to find a way to design a number. And I think that's, you had said, Your Honor, to me, that, we're all one now, right? And the important thing is that some of the things that I've learned in my research is that, like Salisbury, kind of, they're all one and they all share the pain. So I think it's the important thing is, no matter what the budget numbers that you guys have to come out to figure out what the right thing to do is, how do we all work together? Then that makes everybody feel like, it's been tough the last 2 years living in the LSC. Council can weigh that once they come up with what the needs and the wants are, and get that all hammered out. So here, it's the process. Hope that you guys can do that.
All right. Thank you very much. There's one opportunity for closed session that there's no time for today. I will call for motion to adjourn the meeting. So moved by Councilor Lyon. Thank you very much for attending, everybody, and for the remainder of council, we'll see you back here at 4:30 for our committee of the whole meeting.